For February 12th, I invite you all to rise for the singing of O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. Thank you to the Boys Choir, the Grand Prairie Boys Choir, for the rendition of O Canada, and to the Canadian Film Network for the images. We're going to, I'm looking for adoption of the previous council minutes, and I will give Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Councillor Jackie Clayton. What a ring to that, eh? I move the council receive the minutes to the City Council meeting held Monday, January 29th, 2018, as presented.
Thank you. I just recommend the council adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Palat. Please vote. Just waiting for one more. There we go. Great. Thank you. Next up, under delegations, Ms. Wendy Christina, Mr. Terry Jean, and Mr. Stan Holmes from Weyerhaeuser Caribou Range Plan are first under the delegations tonight. As in always, some delegations let us know that they will ahead of time that they are here, and some do not. This is an opportunity for anybody in the community that wishes to come up, speak to any issues, anything on the council agenda, or any other concerns they have. So we thank you for letting us know that you will be coming tonight, and I invite you to sit at the table, and we'll be happy to listen to what you're wanting to speak about in regards to the Caribou Range Plan.
Is it all right if I just pass that around?
Absolutely. So if you wouldn't mind, for everyone in the room and watching at home, if you could introduce yourselves. There you go.
Is that better? Oh, look Perfect. At that. So thank you. My name is Wendy Crosina. I'm the manager for stewardship for Weyerhaeuser Timberlands in Canada.
And I'm Terry Jean. I'm the general manager for the Weyerhaeuser Sawmill here in Grande Prairie.
Well, welcome.
So we appreciate you taking the time or allowing us some time in front of you folks this evening. What we wanted to talk to you about was an issue that you may have heard about provincially, but is of critical importance to us as Weyerhaeuser here in Grande Prairie, and that's this notion of caribou range planning. I think we talked to some folks on the council over the last year and a half, but certainly we haven't addressed the full council on this. We just wanted to bring you up to speed, I think, a little bit on what's been happening and why this issue is important to us as a company, and why this issue is important to you folks as a city. So I provided you with a bit of a, sorry, I provided you, can I just, is it okay if I move this? Sorry. Just, it's hard to lean and talk. Throw it on the floor? Okay. Somebody won't be very happy with me. So I brought a little bit of a handout, and this I think puts the issue in perspective. We've got a process in Alberta whereby we are planning caribou ranges, and by that I mean we're trying to meet some federal targets that the federal government has put down and the province has to meet. And part of the problem is some of the metrics that we're going to be measured on. So as an example, our Grande Prairie FMA here in the Grande Prairie area, just over 1 million hectares. Just over 1 million hectares, 35% of that area is covered by caribou range, boreal caribou range. So there's a potential there as part of this caribou range planning process that range could be off limits to us or could be severely restricted, or our opportunities on that part of our tenure would be severely restricted. So this is a big deal for us. This is a big issue for us. I'm trying to condense an issue that has been in the works for probably 5 to 10 years in 7 minutes. So I apologize if I'm not speaking language that you understand. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me that and I can go back and clarify. So what we're trying to do is we're immersed in this caribou range planning process. We have a draft range plan from the provincial government, and that's being reviewed by the federal government. And there is going to be another review process coming up here in April. So how do I frame this so that it's the Reader's Digest version? We have a level of disturbance on our tenure and within those caribou ranges that's in order of magnitude about 80%. The federal government has said to the provincial government, you have to bring that disturbance level down to no more than 35%. So that's a huge jump. That's a huge leap. So the provincial government, by law and under the Species at Risk Act, has to do this. So they're saying, how are we going to do that? So we're going to do that through restoration. We're going to do that through different harvesting techniques, and we're going to do that through conservation areas and potentially deferrals and long-term protected areas. And that means that we may lose the opportunity to harvest in roughly 35% of our range. So I'm trying to frame this in 5 or 7 minutes, but the one issue that comes to the fore time and time again is they're looking at caribou habitat, and they're not looking at the socioeconomic impacts of this. And what we're here to do is try to help you folks understand the magnitude of the issue to us and to you if we lose tenure or fiber supply or fiber security on that land base. Does that make sense to folks? Okay. Again, not understanding how much of a background you have, it's hard to have this conversation. So we're working with different partners. We're working with the government. We're working with local First Nations, local communities to try to come up with a range plan that we think meets our fiber needs and meets the needs of caribou and meets this Species at Risk Act at the federal level. And some of the key points or some of the key issues for us, and maybe Terry, you can speak to this, but we need fiber security in an adequate quantity over a long period of time in order to maintain our company's interest in capital reinvestment in our mill. So maybe, Terry, if you just want to speak to that for a minute.
Sure. Yeah, we are looking actually right now actively at reinvesting in Grande Prairie. If you remember, about 10 years ago, we built a new planer mill. And so now it's time to upgrade the sawmill. And looking really for a full relife. To be able to do that, the company generally looks on a 20-year time frame. So they want to be able to say that, okay, do we have all the pieces in place of, good workforce, good community, good support services, which we have, and the big one of, do we have a good sustainable fiber supply? So we're planning, like I said, on doing that by actually a decision point here by this summer. So we want to be, and which times well with the plans that have to be in for the caribou by April. Times well for that, but it's also only 2 months from now. So we need to make sure that we do get the support from the communities and to be able to go back to the corporation and say, yes, we have a secure fiber supply, and so yes, we need to invest.
So currently, we don't have that fiber security, and we're feeling like we're at more risk because of the criteria that the federal government has set out in the Species at Risk Act relative to caribou, and we just don't think, or we don't have a good sense of where the province is going to land on this. We don't know how much support we have from the province. So, we contribute, I would say, order of magnitude, roughly $200 million a year, our mills, our sawmill and the pulp mill out here in Grande Prairie, to the local economy. And we think that that's an important point that needs to be made and continue to be made to the provincial government in terms of finding a solution. We've got environmental groups that are ramping up their messaging relative to shutting down some of these caribou ranges to all industrial activity, not just forestry, but also energy, oil and gas. And we're looking for a win-win-win solution, and we think we can find that. So what we're asking from you folks is to, at every opportunity, advocate on our behalf as a sector, advocate on our behalf as a company, and work with the provincial and federal politicians to better understand the magnitude of the socioeconomic impact or losses if some of these caribou ranges are shut down. So there's 19 ranges in the province. We have two in our Grande Prairie tenure. More than, I'd say, I'm trying to remember that, more order of magnitude, 40% of the forested land in Alberta is covered by caribou range. I mean, that's a big deal if you've got restrictions on that, because there's no other place to go in terms of tenure or wood supply. So there's some key dates that I left with you on the handout. The provincial government has got some stakeholder or public information sessions. They've got one here in Grande Prairie scheduled for March 8th. They weren't going to put one here in Grande Prairie, but we advocated for that, and they changed their minds, which was a good thing. It's a bit of an open house, but we would urge folks to talk to your constituents and ask them if they would go in and ask questions and talk a little bit about a working landscape, talk a little bit about how important forestry and energy and industrial sector is to the land base here, and ask the province how they're gonna deal with this problem and find that balance. So I'll just leave it there in case you have questions. Again, I'm trying to condense a 10 years worth of an issue in 3.5 minutes, so I apologize if I've been all over the place.
Well, I thank you for that. I know past council, we also had some information and along different processes. Most municipal councillors of this area are fairly familiar with the case. So, but there may be some questions for tonight. I see in the queue, Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much. I just got a couple questions possibly. In previous years, there was concern of logging operations, and they would close down a certain area while the caribou migrated through. As a hunter conservationist myself, I was in those areas and witnessed it. Is that still part of the plan, or do they want to eliminate all logging operations, not just during a certain time when the caribou are migrating?
So thank you for the question. Good point. The caribou that we have in our tenure migrate back and forth between BC and Alberta. So they're here typically in the winter months, and then they go back to BC in the summer to calve at the higher elevations. And we have in the past put restraints or constrictions on when we harvest and where we harvest to try to accommodate that. The difficulty with this new issue is that 35% disturbance, right? So you're not allowed to have more than 35% disturbance in the entire range, which means that even if you wanted to aggregate harvest or move your harvesting around on the land base, every time you have a cut block or a harvest block or a road or a pipeline or a seismic line, they calculate disturbance by adding a 500-meter buffer on either side, and that contributes to the percentage. It makes it really difficult to add any new disturbance to the land base when you're, at 80% disturbed, and you got to bring it down to 35. So they're saying until you bring it down to 35, you can't do anything potentially. So it wouldn't matter if we wanted to accommodate that as we have in the past and move harvesting around until you get down to that 35%. There's a potential we could do nothing in there.
Okay, just another question. In the areas that you're concerned with, is percentage-wise just, is it mostly old growth or stuff that's really good to harvest?
So the current age class distribution in the 35% of our tenure that is in caribou range is probably getting to the point, well, it's at harvest age or beyond, partly because in the last 25 years, we've been kept in the periphery. We haven't been allowed in there because it has been caribou range. We've always been told that we would be allowed in there. You will get in there. We'll build a plan. You can have a little bit of it, and we'll let you get in there at some point. So the timber in there is at the point, if we don't harvest it within the next probably 10 to 30 years, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it to fire. We're going to lose it because it's going to just grow old and die, or we're going to lose it to mountain pine beetle. So it's not even going to be healthy caribou habitat. That's the frustrating part.
Right. And just my final question, and thank you very much for answering them. What is the numbers of the caribou in the area that you're concerned about in your growth area?
So that's another good question. So the provincial government doesn't currently measure numbers. They measure population trends, which is difficult for me to accept, quite frankly. We've offered to support or fund. They've got this process now where they can go out and they can collect caribou poop, right? And they can take that and they can analyze it and they can tell you how many individual animals there are based on genetics. The province has just started to do that in some of the ranges in the east part of the province. They haven't done it here, so they just tell us what they think the trends are, and they go out and they count cow-calf pairs. So they estimate, and this is an estimate, and I use the air quotes because it's an estimate, anywhere from 30 to 70 or 80 animals in the Narrowway, which is the one right along the BC-Alberta border, and anywhere from 80 to 110, 120 in the Red Rock Prairie Creek, which is farther south.
And we all know that if we got a deep pile of snow, the wolves could have lunch pretty good.
It's interesting. We're finding, because we have a research project we've got caribou collared. We've had caribou collared to follow their movements and track them since 1998. And we have a forensic veterinarian go out every time one of these collars goes on mortality, when one of the caribou die. And we try to determine what killed the caribou. And we're finding, it was wolves primarily in the past, but we're finding now that cougar and grizzly bear and black bear are becoming just as prevalent in terms of predators as wolves are. But just as an interesting aside, I'm a bit of a science geek, so I apologize for that.
Well, thank you very much for answering my questions. I appreciate.
Next, I have Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Clayton. Thank you very much for coming in today. I don't have any questions for you, but I want to reiterate, I don't think we can overstate the economic impact on Grande Prairie and how important it is for our residents to get involved, to come out to that March 8th meeting, or if they're unable to access the link online at the Alberta government website. And that the sweeping changes of this federal legislation would be hard on Grande Prairie for sure. I actually was a contract nurse in the pulp mill and on 2 of the last 3 major construction projects that you had down at Warehouse there, starting with GPOP. So I understand the economic impact that this would have just in Grande Prairie, but it would completely decimate some northern Alberta, northwestern Alberta communities. And that again impacts us economically because we are such a retail economic draw from those communities. So I'm speaking to thank you for coming today and allowing us the opportunity. For those who happen to be watching, please go and attend this meeting if you can, or at least give feedback. And I think you referred to something that was difficult for you to accept, and I understand there are a number of concerns with the parameters that this legislation puts on what industry can do. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. Next, I have Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Clayton. That sounds weird to say, but anyways, I just wanted to a couple of points. I guess I believe the Chamber's been working on this as well for the last several while. I'm not sure if you're still working with them on it as well, because I believe they're.
We haven't met with them recently, but they're on our list to go back and just remind them that we're still here. Thank you. Yeah.
And definitely appreciate the information. It's a pretty scary thought. Is there a number? I guess if I definitely will attend on the 8th there, but is there a number if the industry is saying around we're at 80% and they're trying to have a 35% threshold? Is there a number that's palatable that you guys could make work? That I'm just trying to figure out how far the gap really is here. Like,
In terms of disturbance?
yeah, like, is there?
So the disturbance metric was a calculation coming from the federal government, and I'm being recorded, aren't I? So I have to be careful. I have to use my inside voice or my outside voice here. It was a number that they said, so in order for caribou to have a 60% probability of persistence, they said that they had to have no more than 35% disturbance. And it was a calculation, but it was also a compromise number. So we are continuing to support science to try to hone down that number and get closer to what that number might be. The other thing that I would point out is disturbance is only one metric to measure success in terms of getting caribou populations back on a positive trajectory. We have examples across the country where there is more than 35% disturbance and the caribou are doing okay. So in answer to your question, there's not an absolute number, and I'm not sure that there ever will be, because you have to take this on a range-by-range basis. And that's one of the problems with this recovery strategy at the federal level, is they say all the ranges have to be treated the same. And they're not the same. They're just not. So there's not an absolute number. We continue to support research to the tune of millions of dollars a year to try to find different levers to pull that will help us get caribou back on a positive trajectory in terms of population.
Thank you.
Next, I have Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Chair Clayton. It's scary because it doesn't just affect your guys' industry either. It affects a lot of what's going on around here. I'm kind of curious, is there any word, if we start cutting back on disturbance, is there any word on how they're going to target that to different industries, how they're going to say, all right, this industry or this company gets to do this, sorry, this industry, this company, you're going to have to do less?
So what they're focusing on in the short term is the legacy footprint from the seismic activity, because that makes up a large portion of the disturbance. Once they get past that, I think gain order of magnitude 12,000 kilometers worth of seismic activity or lines in the province that have to be restored in these caribou ranges. I think then they'll get to the point where they're going to start talking about how you're going to share the landscape. They have said that the province, and when I say they, I mean the province, they've talked about one of their management strategies is ILM, integrated land management. So they're going to try to have energy companies and forestry companies, as an example, build a road plan together to minimize footprint. They are going to talk to the energy companies, and I can't speak for the energy industry, but I've been part of these discussions about, how they might be able to minimize footprint in terms of multiple uses on a well pad, that sort of thing. But they haven't really come down to the bare brass tacks of how that's going to work. I think they're just focused on that legacy footprint for now.
Thank you.
I see no further questions in the queue. I would like to thank you for coming tonight. I know this issue is, as many people have indicated, a very important issue for our region. And as many people know, forestry seems to be one of the industries that can balance out the highs and lows of oil and gas. So we really appreciate the work you're doing. And I strongly encourage, as Councillor Friesen said, for as many people as possible to attend the March 8th event at Elks Hall. If just so you're aware, there's no business arising from this until the end of the meeting. So if anything were to come out of this sort of presentation tonight, it wouldn't be brought up till the end of the meeting. But administration will contact you if you don't want to stick around. However, you're more than welcome to stick around.
Do you want us to stay?
I don't see a need, but
okay.
If you'd like to, you can. Otherwise, if there's an action item that comes out of this, someone from administration will be in contact.
Okay, thank you. And I urge folks to ask the hard questions when they go to the open house. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next under delegations, Mr. Cody Bairstow with the Northern Alberta Development Council. Welcome, Mr. Bairstow.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to present today and engage with your council. My name is Cody Bairstow, here today on behalf of the Northern Alberta Development Council. We're currently sort of canvassing the area and reintroducing ourselves to municipalities and key stakeholders get in touch with everyone and find out what's going on. A couple things have happened over the last year with the NADC. It was affected by what was going on provincially. There was a period of time where our board was not replaced. That full board was just about replaced in September with 8 new members. And to coincide with that, municipal elections took place as well in October. And with that, we felt the need to make sure we got back out and made sure everyone know who we are and what we're doing. So with that, that's the reason I'm here today, is to talk to you guys and let you know that I'm here. As well, with those new councillors, there is another Grande Prairie member from the NADC, Sherry McMillan. Her background is with Alberta Health Services, specifically mental health. So she's not here today, but she's out doing the same sort of thing, servicing her strengths and background. So the NADC is engaged in quite a few things. I'll read our mandate just so you guys understand what it is, and then I'll break it down a little bit further. But the mandate of the council is to investigate, monitor, evaluate, plan, and promote practical measures to foster and advance general development in Northern Alberta, and to advise the government accordingly. And without limiting the generality of the foregoing, the council may investigate the requirements of the people resident in Northern Alberta and make recommendations in that regard in respect of social and economic development, development of communities and service delivery, and development of government services and programs. Long-winded, but essentially we can do just about anything. We represent an interesting area in the north, 60% of the landmass, 9% of the population. It's an enormous task when you have so many resources and so many things going on in the north and such a small population. You can be underrepresented at times by any amount of government or industry, and it's important that we advocate and provide information when and where we can and together. So our council has met. We've met twice now, and out of our first few meetings, we have prioritized a number of items. The shift from the year when we were a little bit short on councillors was, at the time, we spent a lot of time working on advancing projects and supporting our municipal partners. But with a full council appointed now, we're shifting more into an advocacy role, and we are a great information conduit to get back to government. We are a government board. We have direct access, and that's sort of where we're trying to pursue things right now. So with that being said, some of the things with our discussions as a council and everything else, Northern Broadband is a big one for the north. It's something that we've worked on, and again, these topics and these items are on our website. There's an incredible amount of information on that website, very well presented documentation from a very talented and well-informed staff. So I encourage you to spend some time on that. Transportation, of course, the highways in and out of the north, on even things including east-west connectors, are very important to this council. And of course, health services. As always, interesting enough, a lot of our topics become very relevant to today's important topics, things that came out of our council, which I will mention is a very diverse, probably one of the most diverse councils you'll see out there. Mental health, addictions, and midwifery. I'm not going to be much help with those topics, but I will try, and that's why we have Sherry McMillan here in Grande Prairie to help out with those items. So, as mentioned, that's why I'm here. I'm here to engage you guys. We have a special week coming up, which is Growing the North. And fortunately for Northern Alberta Development Council, we are here that week. We are not only here this week or that following week from now, we are hosting our board meetings here. So if there is, any will or desire for the council or any of your administration to be meeting with us and talking about any of the items that may overlap or things that you may need from our behalf, we are here next week, and I strongly encourage anyone to reach out and contact myself or through our executive director, Janice Simpkins, who most of you probably know as her time in municipal government as well. So yeah, and if you can do that, we are here next week, and we will make time where we can for just about anyone. we have a number of initiatives I'll just mention, so you're aware of what we have been working on. Current projects include the Water North Coalition, Labor Education Research North, of course, the health topics I was discussing. The NAC has quite a few partnerships. We even hosted the Northern Health Summit in June 2016. NAIL, Northern Alberta Elected Leaders. We have secretariats and everything else there. So we're working on a number of things. Like I said, probably too much to get into the weeds on those, and you can look into the details on our website or contact us further on them. But I will leave you guys with 2 questions as a council that you don't have to answer now, but I do ask that you get in touch with us. In council's opinion, what is the best way for us to engage with you guys as a council and your region as a whole? And also, where do you see our council being most effective to advance priorities of your community? If you guys can think about those things and spend the time to get back to us, whether it's next week in person or any time down the road, it would be greatly appreciated. So.
Mr. Bairstow, any questions for the delegation tonight? Seeing none, I think you got off fairly easy, and it's great that you'll be coming to Growing the North, and everybody knows how to contact you, so I appreciate you coming forward.
Thank you very much.
All right, next, under delegations that were able to let us know they were coming tonight, there's a representative, maybe 2, from the Grande Prairie Roller Derby Association. Can nobody jump all at once? Oh, there we go. Welcome. Come on up. Introduce yourself. Hello, ladies. Thanks for coming.
Hi, I'm Christina McNeil, aka TN Tina, because I'm Dynamite.
Nice.
Carrie Scarberg.
Okay.
Great. Jennifer Greentree, aka Undertaker.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, well, thanks for coming tonight, ladies. And how can we help you at all tonight?
I just thought I would start off with an opening line, like a hairdresser, a funeral director, and a pole dancer walk into a town council meeting. Just thought I would start with that.
Lovely.
Sorry, it was bad. Anyways,
We'll let you guess which one is which.
You do the math. Basically, we're here today. We're looking for accessible, affordable, adaptable space. We've been struggling for the last 8 years. We like to practice 2 to 3 days a week. On occasion, we need Saturdays and Sundays for bouts, boot camps, scrimmages. Basically, what roller derby does, it gives moms and dads and kids things that they can do together. This also enables us to draw in other communities. Prince George has about 58 members. Chetwynd, a little bit smaller with 6. Fort St. John has 40. Bellevue, they had to kind of fold their league because they couldn't get a practice space. They have 1 ref that we still use a lot. And Whitecourt has 16. So we do have the smaller communities that actually have big numbers, and we're able to borrow refs and players, and potentially, I think with the right space and support, we could grow the sport. So affordability right now, we're paying about $50 an hour, and we're affording about 2 to 4 hours a week. Our league fees for our juniors is about $30, and our adults are $60. It costs the average person $50 a year for insurance, and about $150 to $200 for knee pads, elbows, wrist guards, helmets, mouth guards, skates. And then adaptable, so that's the hardest one that we've been struggling with. We need a space that we can set up a regulation track to host sanctioned bouts, boot camps, scrimmages, etc. Because safety is the #1 concern. Basically, the spaces that we've had are too small. They have pillars. It's just so that we don't crash into things, I guess, because it gets a little bit hectic. We just had a recruitment day during the big snowfall of the century. We had 30 people show up. We had countless cancellations. We actually weren't able to do our game, but considering the weather, we think we got a little bit of publicity. The Bose Crystal Gardens let us use the space for the day, which was awesome. We fell in love with it. This space would be awesome to us if we could get our little hands on it. It would help us recruit juniors, adults, referees, non-skating officials, fans. Like I said, our biggest setback in the last 8 years was our commute. We had to commute out to Wembley, Sexsmith, and Claremont. So basically, it's a long drive after a long day, and then by the time you get back to town to put your kids to bed or whatever, it's really trying on people. So also, I think if we can incorporate all these three, your accessibility, affordability, and the adaptable space, we can, it'll help promote tourism because it draws in crowds. I guess a couple interesting facts they can leave you with is it was 2011 we rented the tech center and we got I think a great deal on it. I think it was $1,000 for the weekend. We had our scapegoats slaughter at the Evergreen Tech Center and we had 1,400 people in attendance, which was pretty awesome. And then I don't know if anybody follows roller derby, but it was the third year of the World Cup in Greater Manchester. So there was 38 teams in 37 countries, and Canada took home bronze, so it was pretty awesome. And then also Canada does have a junior roller derby team that has 2 members from Alberta, and I guess we would, as a board, would love to see that number grow. Basically, roller derby to us, it empowers men, women, children, encompasses a healthy lifestyle, moving, exercise, building confidence, positive body images, and teaches self-assertiveness. And basically, that's.
If I could just
Absolutely.
mention about the tourism. When we first started in 2010, we often had to drive to Edmonton or Calgary to play in any games. Now we have these local teams in our area. We have, it's a WIFTA, it's the Women's Flat Track. It's a sanctioned team, which we're not, we would like to be. But there's a team in Prince George and there's one in Edmonton. We're kind of the halfway point, and what I want to do is host a tournament, a halfway tournament, so maybe those 2 cities could play off here, and then Whitecourt and Grimshaw can play off here, and we can have a whole big day of games. We never had this opportunity before. We always had to travel so far, and now we have all these little teams, 2 hours drive around our area, and our team has kind of hit a landslide. But yeah, I think if we had a space, a reliable space, that we could definitely get some more people coming out.
Great. Thank you. Anything else that you'd like to
One other thing I would ask, you know how I'm here, is I've taken it upon myself to do coaching and things like that. There's some education, I think it would be nice if it was available to us. Dealing with some teenagers, drug addictions in people, just suicidal people. I'm not a professional, and I've encountered it a lot, and I do the best I can. But if there was some sort of education that was available to us for that as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any questions in the queue from anybody. Oh, here we go. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Clayton. So this space, would it need to, what does it take for you to set up a flat track? Do you have are there bumpers?
We just use tape. It's all we just need a flat space
okay.
That's taped out. It's all measured.
So this is a shared space. It's not
Well, that's the thing, if we could get a space that we could share with, skateboarders or ball hockey or roller skating. Because there isn't a space for everybody, right?
No, there isn't. Not until Councillor Bressy gets done with his plans. Thank you.
Somewhere, but like I said, we really did fall in love with that space. It was perfect. They usually have space to set up for, you set up your penalty boxes and your timers and your scorekeepers and then they usually have
beer gardens
and merchandise tables for because people like to buy souvenirs and stuff like that.
Thank you. Councillor Bressy.
Thank you, Chair Clayton. I think it's out of order right now for me to tell you guys how awesome I enjoyed my time checking out roller derby, so I'll tell you about that later. So instead, just a comment I'd have for you folks is I appreciate the comment about wanting to know how to help people that need help, and I encourage you to follow our crime prevention department on Facebook. They put on regular lunch and learns that I found some very helpful in how to work, especially with youth, but with all people. So I'd encourage you to check out crime prevention.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Chair Clayton. One other thing too, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, we have a Pursuit of Excellence Committee. So if there was an opportunity maybe to look at that, if you're looking for some coach or player development, there's opportunities with that as well. Just when we're saying size, is there like a space you get? Is it 50 feet by 100 feet, or what sort of space are we looking at here?
A hockey arena is ideal. We can lay 2 tracks in a hockey arena, or we could just lay 1 track and then have a game. So a hockey-sized area would be great, where we could have 2 separate practices going on at the same time.
Because, like, I don't know if you know the Wembley curling rink, the back of the Wembley Arena. It's too small. The Claremont Agriplex where we're at is too small. We were at the curling rink in town, but there's pillars in the middle, so it's very, I don't know if you've ever watched it, it gets pretty, full body contact, it gets pretty rough.
About 150 feet with a crash space, track space, and then some chairs, audience.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, ladies. I did have a question.
Would anybody like a copy of the 63 pages of rules? I'll leave that. No? Yeah.
If you'd like.
Online, www.
If anyone wants the rules, we also have some of our programs from the other day.
Yeah, we'll hand them out.
Perfect. In regards to education, I also encourage you, and you may already be doing so, but work with the Grand Prairie Sport Council to take, there's lots of different opportunities that they provide, whether it's everything from a taping course to a coaching course and different levels, and they're a great group to work with. So, and they might also be able to get the word out for your needs. And
I'm talking with Karma.
Karna? Perfect. Yeah. Karma's good too, though, so good luck with that. And all right. Yeah, if you want to leave those with Councillor Bressie, he could pass them around. That'd be great. I will just ask if there's any other delegations here tonight. I think I know why everyone else is here, so just one more ask. All right, seeing no one else coming forward, we're going to go to the public hearings. First, under public hearings, Arbor Hills ASP Bylaw Amendment C-1212E, an outline plan bylaw amendment to the C-1281-3, and a land use bylaw amendment C-1260-33. I call this public hearing to order and look for an introduction from administration.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Clayton. The applicant is seeking to rezone 2 parcels of land within the Arbor Hills 2 outline plan area. The first is from residential combined to small lot residential, and the second is also from RC, but to general residential. And as part of this amendment, there are corresponding amendments to the Arbor Hills 2 outline plan and to the Arbor Hills area structure plan. This is what the new area structure plan would look like, and this is the new outline plan. We consider the impacts of this amendment to be minimal because the combined residential district that these 2 properties are currently zoned as do allow lower density housing. The city does have a large supply of multifamily housing, vacant lots available, and the current market in Grande Prairie is towards low density housing, and therefore, like I said, we consider the impact of this amendment to be minimal. As part of the outline plan application, the large circled area on the north kind of central part of the plan, they are proposing to remove the lane that existed between these 2 blocks of lots, and that I guess has precipitated the inclusion of a small roundabout at the intersection of these 2 collector roads, and we are supporting the 3 proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for administration? Seeing none, I will ask if there's anybody here to present any information. Oh, I got one now. Councillor Plott.
I just was going to say I'd be willing to make a motion.
All right, well, we'll just wait on that. I'm just going to see if there's any other presentation or submission part from anyone here tonight. If not, I will close the public hearing. Oh, are you coming up or no? Come on up. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the thousands of people at home watching.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Clayton and Council. I'm Scott Rossler with Helix Engineering. With me, Scott Pravitz from Prudential Lands. Very quick overview. Sounds like there's not a lot of concerns with this, but just history on it. We are bouncing back and forth on land uses here just to try and figure out what the market wants. So appreciate administration's cooperation in that regard. I believe we've dealt with all the engineering concerns. There was a roundabout added to the plan, so it will be a very small roundabout, like a mini roundabout. Typically, I would say half the size of what you're thinking roundabout, like some small trees and a little tiny island in the middle of the street, basically. The intention of that is to slow down traffic. We did have one comment. We're actually working through it right now with administration to do with the compensation that's being paid. So just in an interpretation thing, I think we're fine with it. We're just trying to determine timelines on the 15,000 that is paid back to the city as a compensation for changing from multifamily to single family. Maybe for consideration on that policy in the future, addressing some sort of a timeline to it. This was actually zoned to multifamily after the policy was passed. So now we're going backwards and having to pay kind of a double-ended penalty for it. So we'll sort it out. We're not too concerned about it. We just don't have the exact answer yet, but it's more an interpretation thing. So unless Scott has something.
And it's in the report, right? The report that you have, it's in there. That's the only reason that we were thinking that we should bring it up. I don't think it'll have an effect on the actual amendment.
Yeah, we're comfortable with we're just dealing with planning right now on the policy end of things. So once this passes, then we'll sort out what the number is and whatever. So we just wanted to bring it to your attention, being that it is in the report. So
thank you. Any comments or questions for the delegation? All right, seeing none, I think that's great. Thank you for coming tonight. So I will close this public hearing and look for business arising. Councillor Palat. Oh, I'm sorry, second. There you go.
Thanks, Councillor Clayton. So I'd make a motion that council give first reading to bylaw C1212E, being an amendment to the Arbor Hills Area Structure Plan.
That motion's in order. I would ask that you please vote. And the motion's carried. I'm looking for a motion to give second reading. Councillor Palat.
Sorry.
If you want to just turn your mic on, I bumped you out of the queue and now I put you back in.
Just that I would recommend that council give second reading to bylaw C1212E.
Great, and that motion's in order. If I can ask you to please vote. And the motion's carried. Looking to Councillor Palat for a motion to have third reading.
Okay, I would give a motion to have third reading for bylaw C-1212E at this meeting.
All right, and that motion is also in order. I ask you to please vote. And the motion's carried. Continuing on, would you like to keep with them all, Councillor Palat?
I would make a motion that we give third reading to bylaw C1212E, being an amendment to the Arbor Hills Area Structure Plan.
Great. I ask you please vote. There we go. That motion is carried. And now for a motion to give second reading. My apologies. First reading on 12E or 1281-3, please. Please vote. Let's try that one again. All right, so we're looking to give first reading to bylaw C-1281-3.
I would make a motion that council give first reading to C-1281-3, being an amendment to the Arbor Hills 2 outline plan.
Great, and I ask you to please vote. That motion is carried. Did we clear that by accident? Okay, we'll just do that one more time. I'm going to cancel it one more time and we go. Please vote. There we go. That motion is carried. Now looking to give second reading.
Yeah, I'd make a motion that council gives second reading to bylaw C-1281-3.
That motion is in order. And I ask you to please vote. Looking for one more. There we go. And that motion is approved. Looking for a motion to have third reading.
I'd make a motion to have third reading of bylaw C-1281-3 at this meeting.
And that motion is carried.
Okay, and I'll make a motion to give third reading to bylaw C-1281-3, being an amendment to the Arbor Hills 2 outline plan.
That motion is in order. Hang on. There we go. That motion also carries. Now moving on, looking for to give first reading. Councillor Palat.
I would make a motion to give first reading to bylaw C-1260-33, being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
Motion's in order. Please vote. And motion carried. Now for a motion to give second reading.
Make a motion to give second reading of bylaw C-1260-33.
There we go. And that motion is carried. Next, for a motion to have third reading.
You make a motion to have third reading of bylaw C-1260-33 at this meeting. Yeah.
There we go. Please vote. And finally, there we go. That motion is carried. And finally, to give third reading.
Glad we're getting lots of practice with you on the buttons here. I'll make a motion to give third reading to bylaw C-1260-33, being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
There we go. I ask you to vote. And that motion is carried. So thank you, Councillor Palat, for that. And we are good on that one. Now, moving to the next public hearing. Land Use Bylaw Amendment C-1260-85 regarding a supersized billboard at 8707 108th Street. I call this public hearing to order and ask for an introduction from administration.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor Clayton. The city has received an application to amend the land use bylaw to allow an oversized billboard to be located at 8707 108th Street. Currently, billboards can have a dimension of 3.1 meters by 6.1 meters, which is a 18.1 square meters in size. The amendment would add a new definition for supersized billboards that would have a sign area of 4.27 meters by 14.63 for a total of 62.47 square meters. And allow a billboard of that size at this specific location only. The amendment would allow supersized billboards to have only static displays, and electronic message displays would not be permitted. The application proposes to regulate the development of this and future billboards by creating the new definition, establishing some minimum standards, which are in the bylaw, and also requiring that every proposed super billboard that would be proposed in the city would need a site-specific amendment to the land use bylaw. And this would allow each land use bylaw amendment application to be considered on a site-specific basis on the specific merits of every sign in every location in the city. The proposed location is shown here on the map. There is an existing billboard located on this property right now. Actually, I just go ahead. This is a picture of the existing billboard from the south looking north. And this is a picture of the same, or the opposite side of the same billboard from the other direction. The sketch here shows essentially the sign on the right is a standard 3.1 by 6.1 millimeter or meter billboard, and the one on the left is the size of a super billboard that is being proposed at this location. The site is along 108th Street, which is a arterial road with a 70-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. Engineering has expressed some concern about the impacts. However, there are no technical guidelines that would quantify such impacts. As a result, they would indicate that signs of this size should be closely assessed on a case-by-case basis, which, in fact, this is what this amendment and other amendments, if we got other applications, would do. The sign is located 223 meters north of an existing digital billboard. In the land use bylaw, the minimum separation distance between two billboards is 300 meters, and that's for regular sized billboards, and this is obviously a much larger. We don't have any standard, obviously, in place because this is a new sign type in the city, and so at this point we don't really know what an appropriate separation distance is between two billboards when one or both of this size. So in conclusion, we are of the opinion that adding a super billboard to the land use bylaw is appropriate. We expect that more signs of this size will be proposed in the city in the future. We think that this location might be inappropriate just because it's in a fairly dense urban environment. There's reasonably complex traffic movements and new locations along the future bypass, and some of these arterial roads in the city might be more appropriate locations for signs of this size. But a sign of this size at this location, we think is basically just out of scale for the area. Thank you, Mayor Clayton.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for administration? I have Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. For administration, just a question based on my amateur observation of what's going on here. When I look at the picture and you superimpose the possible sign size there, when I'm looking north along 108th Street, as this picture does, I don't see this sign obliterating any view of anything else other than a building. And so the question I have for you is, would not a sign this size be easier to read and therefore less of a distraction for oncoming traffic? And in this particular case, what would be the distraction from?
Mr. Welton?
Through the mayor, yeah, as I indicated in my report, like in both directions, I haven't done this for the other direction. In both directions, there's really not an awful lot specifically that this sign is blocking the view of. Yeah. It's really just more of the scale of it and the proximity of it to the road is I wouldn't say it's an issue. The sign is going to be within the property line, which is what any billboard needs to be, is just up to the edge of the property line. But given the size of the sign and how much further away it could be read, typically a billboard of the standard size, you might be able to see from 100, 200, 300 meters. Of this size, you might be able to be, and drivers might be actually looking at the sign from the other side of 84th Avenue, because the size is that big, and assuming that there's no trucks or anything in the way, the sign is visible from that far away, and our general concern is that it has the potential to be distracting drivers much further away than just driving by at 70 kilometers an hour. If they're looking at it and being able to see it and read it from 300 or 400 meters away, where they're on the opposite side of 84th Avenue, where they're where there are more complex traffic movements, then that has the potential to impact traffic safety. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Or Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. You're good, Councillor Blackburn. All right. Next, Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. So I was going to ask about what complex traffic movements are around there, because in the pictures you had there, it looks like pretty much straight away, and I drive that quite often because I just moved out of a business location that was just a block over from there, and it's pretty much a straightaway. There's not a lot of complex, but you did say that you could see it from potentially south of 84th Avenue. But with that argument, I think, wouldn't a driver be looking at that digital billboard that we have much closer to 84th Avenue from the other side of 84th Avenue? I don't see this as a static billboard on the other side of a digital billboard as being a potential distraction. Do you have any quantifiable evidence, any recommendations around that?
Certainly, I don't have anything quantifiable. As the report mentions, this is a two-sided billboard, and the sign will also be visible from the southbound traffic on the north. And as you can see from this illustration, there's I think it's the 89th Avenue intersection is just a little bit to the north of this site, so that there's obviously, because it's a two-sided billboard, there is traffic and drivers observing the sign
from the other way. Is it? And it is currently already a two-sided billboard?
The existing billboard is two-sided.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I know that this is on school board property, so it's going to be good revenue for the school board. I think that means that we don't get property tax on it. But I'm kind of curious, other billboards like this built other places of the city, do you have any idea if there'd be property tax ramifications on these for us?
Through the mayor, I'm not an expert on assessment. It's my understanding that these signs are not taxable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much. Just a question to administration regarding proposed amendments to the sign bylaw that you were suggesting earlier. If this was to go through today, would we be giving them grandfather clause on the next one, the changes that could happen on the amendments? And if so, are we going to put a timeline on the permitting of this sign for the length that can be if it was to go through? And if it doesn't go, if we vote the amendments to go through and they have some stuff that deals with the signs, could we limit the use of this sign eventually? Or, I'm having a hard time getting it out, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Mr. Welton?
Through the mayor, I'm not 100% clear on the grandfathering that you mentioned with respect to the sign permit or the development permit for the sign.
So I guess what I'm getting at is we're looking at some amendments in the future, and that's probably going to take place this year, I would take it, for the large super boards.
Mr. Welton?
Through the mayor, this application is specific to this super board at this location.
Yes.
There are no other proposed super billboards anywhere else in the city at this time.
Great.
The amendment contemplates that if other landowners, other sign companies want to put supersized billboards in the city, that they would need to follow a similar amendment process.
Okay. So we're not, okay. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Clayton. Thank you very much, Dan, for your report. Just a couple quick questions. So this is a long and arduous process, developing the sign bylaw over a couple of years. At any point, did we consider looking into super boards? There was a letter attached to the report that said that this has been pretty common for 2 decades. You drive around Toronto or even outside the city, there's super boards out there. Did we contemplate adding this into our sign bylaw when we were going through the process of developing it?
Mr. Welton?
Through the mayor, I don't recall the specifics of it. It may have, I'm kind of thinking it might have come up a little bit, but I'm not 100% sure. I think certainly in the context of Grande Prairie, these are obviously quite new. The report and photographs indicate that there is one of these supersized billboards is located in the county out by Ritchie Brothers, I believe. but I don't recall anything specific about including these into the sign bylaw a couple of years ago.
Okay, so currently then now we're talking about amending it on a case-by-case basis. So someone puts in an application for super board and then administration will look into whether or not we'd allow it in the specific location?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, or Madam Mayor, sorry. The way the amendment is written, what it would do is it would say that a super billboard type of billboard is now regulated in the city, and that each proposed location would be looked at on a case-by-case basis through an amendment to the land use bylaw. So what would essentially happen over time, if more of these came in and council approved more of them, there would essentially be like a list of, super billboards are allowed here, very specific locations. One of the benefits of doing it that way versus just opening it wide open is because these are obviously a new thing. We are, I guess, just learning about sort of what the impacts of these things are going to be. As I think I'm sort of the same as everyone else here, and like I I believe that this sign is basically out of scale for this site, but maybe I'm wrong. And until the city actually starts getting large signs like this at different locations, then we will actually know better about how to actually regulate them. And so until then, doing these on a site-specific basis, I think is probably the more prudent and low-risk way to go. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Dan. I guess I kind of am of the belief that, I mean, if we're going to make an amendment for one, like that usually starts it, right? You have a row of dominoes and they don't fall unless you shake the table around it or you hit that first one down, right? And then the rest of them go. So I think it might even be prudent for administration to consider potential setbacks, the definitions of super boards, the distances between other signs. I mean, we're talking about a sign that's 3 times the size of a regular standard billboard. Just for my first thought, I was like, well, maybe it should be 3 times the distance away from that other billboard, or maybe we should add that into it. But I think, I don't know, for me, I guess I'm kind of feeling like this is kind of planning backwards in a sense. Like we do this now and then we're going to define it as we go along. And I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that method, but I look forward to what the proponent has to say. And thank you for that, Dan. But I would strongly urge administration at some point, if we're adding this into our land use bylaw or sign bylaws, that we start considering setbacks, distances, variances, and the definition of super board and how we're going to work that into our sign bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Clayton. I guess I feel similar to Councillor Thiessen on the, maybe if we're gonna look at this, that we blanket something a little bit more than just a one-off. I'm personally a fan of billboards. I think they're fine. My concern with this one though is, and I guess administration can clarify, we must have done a variance on one of these 2 signs originally because they are within the 300 meters.
Through the mayor, the digital billboard to the south was given a variance to be 233 meters. I think that's the number, 223, from the existing sign location that we're talking about here. So the digital sign came later, and that one got a variance from the existing static billboard. With respect to, I guess, the issue of a more broad-based sign regulation amendment for super billboards. One of the how do I describe this? One of the elements of sort of the procedure of planning law is, at the end of the day, what we bring forward is the amendment application that the applicant requests. I'm comfortable with the procedure that we've come up with. And if council wants to give administration through whatever mechanism exists, where if council wants to direct, or committee wants to direct administration to actually put some more work into regulating supersized billboards on a more comprehensive basis, certainly council can direct administration to do that. But again, this amendment was largely, the form of the amendment is largely at the request of the applicant. Like I said, I'm comfortable with it, but it is in the form that the applicant requested come to council.
Okay. I think with this location, it speaks a little bit differently than some other ones, I guess, in my mind anyways, just because it's kind of an industrial use and the buildings are in the area. But I guess I am a little bit concerned that we've already given a 25% variance on these two signs being that located, and with the size of the sign. As much as I never normally want to stand in front of industry on anything. I'm just worried it could set a slippery slope if we're going to give a 25% variance and then also put a super build in that place, which is probably going to, like, to speak to Councillor Thiessen's point, maybe should require more of a setback than the 300 meters. So I'm struggling with this one a little bit, I guess.
Thank you, Councillor Plott. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much. Just one more question to administration. Did we look at any future development on the road? Like, is there going to be in the radar in the next 5 to 10 years, 15 years possibly, any possibility, or is any engineering issues concerned with the widening of the road or change of use of the road, paving of that area, subway? Have we looked at that?
Through the mayor, I believe that the long-term transportation plan suggests that is the road directly adjacent to the sign is ultimately going to be 6-lane arterial. This sign, if it's approved and built, it would be within the property line, but it would obviously be closer to the actual carriageway of the road once the road is widened, but it would still be, it wouldn't be hanging out over the road, obviously, but it would be closer to the road once the road is widened. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions for administration, I think there's somebody here to speak on behalf of this public hearing. So please come forward, introduce yourself. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Murray Driver, owner of Driver Advertising Systems and the applicant for this super board. And I realize this application seems a bit challenging, but I think a lot of times when something new is brought in, it's always, or can be, hard to get your head around that sort of thing. I'm going to let my computer warm up here a little bit, a couple of pictures to show you. But first off, I would say thank you for allowing me to come. And second off, please interrupt me if you have a question while I'm going through this, because I have no problem stopping and picking up again. And I'd rather deal with questions than have them kind of get forgotten because somebody was trying to hold it until the end. So some of this will be a little bit redundant, but I'm going to go through it because I think there's some important points to make here. So what is a super board? It is 14 feet high and 48 feet wide, which compared to a regular billboard is significantly larger. But it is a standard outdoor industry product. It is all over North America, has been for several decades. It's all over Alberta. It is in every other large city in Alberta, except for Grande Prairie, and it is they even have them in Valley View. So it's not new. It's and many of these super boards in the larger cities are digitals, and I'm not suggesting that we should have digitals. That's just a fact that they are. So why do we want this? Both local and national advertisers are looking for ways to set themselves apart from their competition. And bigger is simply better in that regard. The advertisers can claim their ability to service the customers much better, and if they can be on that big board, it tells people that they are big and that you should deal with them. And certainly there's an appetite for that kind of presentation. And the other reason is that there are a number of national campaigns that you don't have access to unless you have a super board. The artwork is developed for super boards, and if you don't have the inventory available for that, then you're not considered. And in this light, Grande Prairie is not considered for any of the super board campaigns, and so potential revenue isn't available to us in that regard. How we applied. This has been talked about quite a bit already, but it was our preference to go with a site-specific application as opposed to a bylaw amendment, or as opposed to a variance request. And the reason for that, it was more expensive for us to do it that way, but the reason we chose to do it that way is because it does give the city total control over where this goes. I think it's going to be difficult to try to develop a bylaw when you don't have anything or no experience to draw from. Entertaining this billboard, and perhaps one or two others if the locations are suitable, will give the city experience with them, and then you may decide at some point in time then that you can develop a bylaw that is appropriate across the board. But I think because of the size of these boards, site-specific evaluation is going to be very important, and I think that my opinion is it is the way to go, probably on an ongoing basis. There are going to be very few places in Grande Prairie that are going to be suitable for this. We looked long and hard to find one, and this one is ideal. And I don't believe that it is oversized for the location. And I'm going to show you a variety of examples of why this size of board is quite suitable. Where is it located? This, as you've seen, is in the Peace-Wapiti schoolyard. We feel that there be no negative impact from this application. The site meets all setback requirements from property lines, intersections, accesses, and egresses. We are over 400 meters away from the intersection to the south, and we are 145 meters away from the intersection to the north. The bylaw only requires 100 meters. We are 90 meters from the property access and are only required to be 30. We meet all property line requirements. And the only variance that's required here is that billboard location that is 226 or 223 meters to the south. The bylaw calls for 300, but the separation of 226 has been improved on this exact location on 2 separate occasions, the most recent being less than a year ago. That other billboard does belong to us as well, so we're not stepping on anybody else's toes. There's no impact to any other business. So an important question is, why is there a 300-meter separation between billboards? The reason is to prevent proliferation of signs. Managing the signs in a single area is quite important. But when you look at what can happen in the city, billboards and superboards aside, that particular piece of land, if it was a shopping plaza, could have 5 signs the size of a superboard, and those would all be approved. I think that's clearly much more of a distraction than a single superboard with a single message. So, and I'll show you some examples of that as I go through this presentation. But this single board with its single message in this location with no ability for traffic to make decisions other than to drive straight forward is the perfect location for a superboard. And it will give the city an opportunity to evaluate what a superboard does or how it's responded to within the city. In deciding whether or not there is a distraction factor here, one of the things that was important is that on Highway 40, in this stretch of road, there's even a median in the middle of the road. So no left-hand turns could even take place outside of a light-controlled intersection. For traffic heading south, the lights that are 145 meters away, there's no left turn there. The only place traffic can go other than straight ahead, unless they're turning into the cogen plant, which is a very, very limited number of vehicles that might do that, is to make a right turn, and I think that's 89th Avenue, but I'm not 100% sure. They're turning away from that billboard long before they ever get to it. So it's not going to impact that traffic. Everybody else has to drive straight ahead. I'm going to, if that can get my computer to show up on the screen. We test drove this before the meeting, so we know it works.
He'll be right back.
In town?
Sorry, Councillor Plott, can you maybe turn your mic on and if you had a question? Thanks.
I'm just trying to get a reference for where just my head so I can get an idea. Is there a sign similar to this size anywhere in Grande Prairie?
Absolutely. Okay. There's lots of them, and I'll show you examples. Yeah.
I think IT has got it figured out. All right, just give you a minute here. There we go.
Perfect. Okay. This particular photo is of a sign that was recently approved. And you're probably all familiar with this location. It's traveling north on 98th Street towards Canadian Tire, just north of 108th Avenue. I'm standing in the middle of the boulevard there taking a photo straight into the sign. Traffic's driving straight into that sign. There's a curve in the road. There's a set of lights just around the curve. This was approved this year as not being a distraction to drivers nor a safety hazard. And to my knowledge, there haven't been any issues with this. And I think if there was an opportunity to be distracted, that would provide it, but it appears not to.
And that's a super board?
This sign on the side of the AGT, or the AGT, how about that, on the side of the TELUS building, is much larger than a superboard. And it's only 43 meters from a set of traffic lights. So it's very close. It's static. We've applied for a static board for that reason as well. I think that a digital board of that size, we're a long way from getting there in Grande Prairie, although there are all over Edmonton and Calgary, and they are very close to intersections. Small steps I think we need to take here. But that sign is much larger than a superboard, and that doesn't create any problems being only 43 meters from an intersection, and there are, I believe, 5 different lanes there. 3 go straight through and 1 goes north and 1 goes south. This is the Prairie Mall freestanding sign. That is larger than a superboard. It's just vertical. So we have signs around that have got significant size, but because we're used to them, we don't think of them as an issue. In this particular sign, it's not just large, it also has a digital component in the middle, so there's activity on this sign to pull people's eyes, as well as the size. And this sign's only 1 meter from the access road into the Prairie Mall parking lot. So if this was a superboard, it would contravene an awful lot of things, but it doesn't because it's a freestanding sign. We're all familiar with this intersection. We have 3 different highways here that come into play. There are lots of decisions to be made for traffic heading west. 5 lanes of traffic, 2 going straight through, 2 going south, 1 going north. This billboard right here is 75 meters from the intersection. That's a 25% variance. So we start talking about the variances being 25%. That's not a very big number necessarily for variances. There's many, many situations in the city where more than 25% variances have been granted, if appropriate. And in this case, I believe that it is easily appropriate. The other things with this particular situation, this sign, to my understanding, has been approved to become digital. That sign right there in the background with the London Drugs on top, that freestanding sign is the size of a superboard. So this could replicate our situation where this is the digital sign, this is the superboard sign. We're 226 meters apart. The difference here is these are only 138 meters apart. And there's a very, very busy intersection in between. We don't have any of that to deal with. So this precedent seems to me pretty clearly to say that drivers can handle this kind of stuff. We're not putting something in their way that's going to be a problem. On top of that, in this intersection, there's another sign over on the left side here at Diamond Trucks, which has got a digital display in the middle of it. I'll move to that here. You can see it there. There's a better picture of it. This, when you stand near it, you realize is a monstrous sign. Not quite as big as a superboard, but a fraction smaller. But It's located 60 meters from the center of an intersection, so that variance, and this is for third-party advertising, so it's not called a superboard, but it has the same ability. It has motion on this board, on top of being only 60 meters away, on top of being visible from every angle at that intersection. Doesn't matter whether traveling north, south, east, or west, you can see that board. This is traveling south on the bypass. This is a 70-kilometer-an-hour road, the same as where we're proposing ours on Wapiti Road. These pole signs here, 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 here are the size of a superboard, but again, they're vertical, so we don't think of them as a superboard. They are very close to this set of traffic lights here. They're very close to this set of overhead directional signs right here. There are 6 of these, I'll call them superboards because that helps my case. There are 6 of these superboards in a 296-meter stretch. We couldn't put 2 billboards in that same distance without getting a variance, but there are 6 of these signs in that distance. Why are they allowed? Because they're signs for a plaza, they're freestanding signs. The bylaw calls for only a 60-meter separation between freestanding signs if there's more than 1 business on the sign. If there's only 1 business on the sign, they only need to be 30 meters apart. So technically, in that 300 meters, you could have 10 pole signs, and they would all meet the bylaw standards. There's another shot of going west, so there's more of those signs. That's our main intersection again. Here's a better look at those 6 signs in series, a little bit easier. This picture's a little bit clearer. So you've got those 6 signs, but not only have you got those 6 signs, you've got all the big signs on those buildings for Staples and London Drugs and Save-On and so on. All of that stuff pulling your eye. All of these signs with multiple names and businesses, et cetera, on them. A superboard with a single advertiser seems pretty tame comparatively. Here's another large sign. This sign can be seen from 1,000 meters away. It's 75 meters from an intersection. It doesn't create any problems for anybody. It's there and it's fine. That's another one of our busiest intersections. Our application doesn't involve any intersections. This sign is by the Mark's Work Warehouse, CIBC, on the west side, just west of Costco. You can see there's a digital sign in the background right back there for Jadina's Jewelers. There's a very busy intersection here, and this is a very busy sign. If you're driving by here and you want to look, see if there's a flower shop there, or you want to see if there's an ice cream store there, or whatever, and you're trying to read through there to find it, you're going to be distracted. And yet, that's very close to the road, very close to an intersection, and it's a very big sign. On the same area, there's this sign. This one is on 116th Street, 1 meter from the access to that property. The same very busy, very large sign, but approved and not a distraction to drivers, or not enough so that it's caused any kind of problems. These aren't shown for size, but only that the city recognizes that drivers need to be responsible for their own actions when they're behind the wheel. This sign is 37 meters from the intersection, and you can see how closely it aligns itself with traffic lights and stuff here. I don't think the city can take responsibility for what people are doing in their vehicles. I think that they are, I mean, if they're eating a hamburger or on their cell phone or whatever they're doing and not paying attention, that's a problem. But it's not the city's problem to babysit them beyond some common sense amounts. This is on the Grand Banks subdivision or development. Another huge sign. This is a digital component to it up here. And these panels here, as their building fills up, I'm assuming are going to be filled with the names of the different advertisers that are in there. You can see this one from a long way away because it's up very high and it's bright and it's digital and it changes. And there are 4 more signs of this size or very near this size in a 445 meter stretch along 84th Avenue or 68th Avenue, I'm sorry. So this is very new. So the city is approving these, and I would fully expect would continue to approve signs of this size for these kind of developments. A superboard is no different. It's not any more It has no more magnitude than that does. It's simply the kind of the orientation of the sign. This one's one of my favorites. This one is on the same road we're talking about. It's 500 or 600 meters to the south of our anticipated location. This is larger than our superboard by quite a bit in total square footage. It's a very, very, very busy sign. It's got all kinds of stuff on here. And the best thing about this one is it's right at a set of traffic lights, and it's just a step or two off of the access to that plaza. Again, to my mind, that creates far more challenges for someone behind the wheel than what we're proposing. There's the site that we're looking to use. A larger board in this location does nothing but improve the look of that location in my mind. The new one will not be V-shaped as this one is. It will be flat on like to both sides because of the size. It doesn't need to have the V-shape to create readability. And you can see here, there's the boulevard area here. If they do decide that they're going to widen the road, this is the portion that would be consumed. The paved walking trail here would remain, and then there's a bit of a gap here between where that ends and where the property line starts, where the front edge of the billboard would be. Looking from the other direction, we would be covering off the Peace Wapiti maintenance building. And again, this isn't a building that everybody is dying to see. A very attractive sign on there would be preferred. This is to give you a bit of an indication of just what 226 meters looks like. This is the new digital billboard. You can see right here is the pole sign for Peace Wapiti. And then there is the billboard face of the one we're proposing to change out. Give you another little look at it here. So I've stepped up beside the billboard, and if I just do this a little bit, you can see the distance it really is. 226 meters is a long way away, and someone in their vehicle who's going to make a poor decision that far away from a sign would make that same poor decision that far away from the TELUS sign downtown or any of the other pole signs that are around the community. I don't think that we are putting anyone at risk at all by what we're proposing. And I don't think the city would have any trouble explaining to, if someone happened to phone in and say, hey, I don't like that sign, it's huge. The clear answer is it's no larger than 40 other signs around the city that have got different reasons for being there. That's what the superboard will look like. It's a very clean line. This is an example of one of the campaigns that we would not be able to get without a superboard. Rolex built that campaign, and the only communities that get it are communities that have got superboards that can post that. They won't put that image on a regular billboard.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Sure.
All right, can you just 1 second?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll get to your questions. Mr. Driver, are you almost complete?
Almost.
Okay, thanks.
One of the things that I think is important too is, from the aesthetic side of things, this is an attractive structure. It will remain an attractive structure because no advertiser is going to put an expensive sign like that up on a shoddy product. So now, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, this sign is going to have to look good in order for us to be able to be a viable business with it. To Councillor O'Toole's point about grandfathering changes in and that sort of thing, this is a very expensive project. If we got this approved, but only on an interim basis or a short-term basis, it couldn't happen for us. It's just too expensive to do. We have to look at this as a long-term project. It's a big investment for us. And I just want to summarize with the fact that we really believe that the site-specific application is critical to this type of a project because it's going to be a while before we really can get our heads around what the impact of this is. But other communities are using them and using them effectively, and Grande Prairie is not late in the game because it just hasn't been applied for here before. But it's not new, and it's not outrageous. It will be a nice product in the city, and maybe there won't be another application or another place where you can find one where you can actually put one in the city. But this location is perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Driver. I have a couple people in the queue. I'm gonna sneak Councillor O'Toole in after Councillor Thiessen. But first, Councillor Thiessen.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Driver, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm still struggling with all the freestanding signs. I know that you're showing the size and the dimensions, but those are, as I stated earlier, those are clearly defined in our land use bylaw. And even according to the pictures that you showed us, you had the one billboard that was 225 meters away, but as you get closer to the school board property, they also have a freestanding sign on their property too, with many different signs on it. So that puts it doubly in contravention as per your other examples. My question for you is, though, according to your letter, you said that for the last 2 decades, super boards have been a thing.
Yes.
And I'm going to guess for quite some time, you've been involved in the sign industry and making money off of signs. You also said that you've had numerous requests for this product, both locally and internationally. I guess I'm kind of curious, how recently did those requests come into you? Were they like just this last year when you decided to apply for the billboard in March of 2017? Was it 5 years ago? Was it 10 years ago? Have they been asking since super boards have been a thing? And just being an industry guy.
Sure.
Could you answer that for me?
We've had requests for them, and I would estimate probably for about the last 4 years. We talked to administration prior to the last reevaluation of the sign bylaws, and we didn't really pursue it at that point in time, because we were kind of in flux with it. And I'm trying to think of the administrator that I talked to. Can you help me out, Dan? Who's the English accent fellow from planning?
Stuart Wright.
Stuart Wright, yes, thank you. I spoke to Stuart about it, and he talked about the possibility of rolling that into that bylaw at the time, but he chose not to. I'm not sure for what reason. And so as we worked our way through that and kind of waited it out, and then we got to the end of it and realized that it wasn't in there. So that was only adopted last April, so it's very, very recent, those changes. But because it wasn't included, or there was no inclusion for anything beyond the standard size of billboard, then we felt that this was the only way that we could bring this forward. But that it comes forward in a way that is very, very manageable for the city. But we have had interest in this size of billboards for this opportunity for at least 3 or 4 years.
So with being involved in the sign industry and having interest in this, I know that the city undertook a pretty comprehensive consultation process with industry as to what kind of signs were standardized and what we could use, potential feedback for setbacks and roadsides and size of signs, types of signs, digital signs, all sorts of stuff. I would imagine that you were probably consulted inside of that process. If you were getting requests for this 3 to 4 years ago while we're just at the beginning of our process to do our sign bylaw, why didn't you speak up to Dan or to the rest of the planning committee and saying, hey, as a man in the industry, I'm debating getting into super boards, and this may affect your sign bylaw moving forward. Why wouldn't you push that if it meant significant revenue for your business?
To the chair, a couple of reasons for that. One thing you don't want to do is tip your hand to your competition. And we have a fairly significant competitor in the Patterson Group. They have billboards and superboards all over Western Canada. We weren't completely ready to be able to move forward with the project. We were exploring it at that time. There's a lot of things that you have to take into account, finances, locations, and that sort of thing. If I pushed that forward and we weren't ready, I know somebody who would have been ready, and we could have shot ourselves in the foot.
So this is a competitive advantage?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in business, we have to do that. I mean, the last thing I'm going to do is give someone an opportunity to take away an idea where we can be first. It's like bigger is better in the Super Board. If we are the first company that brings a Super Board to Grande Prairie, that says something about our company. That makes us a player in the marketplace, which we are. We are very competitive in the marketplace, but this would help us to secure that foothold. My conversation with administration about super boards in its initial stages, if they chose to move forward at that time and really work at that would have been fine with me. But for me to push it would not have necessarily made good business sense at that time.
But does it make good business sense for the city of Grande Prairie to undertake an arduous 2-year process to develop a sign bylaw without having all the definitions presented to them by the professionals that are in the industry?
All of that information was provided. It wasn't acted upon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor O'Toole, if you want to just turn your mic on because you're not in my queue. You had a question?
My mic is on. Thank you very much, Your Honor. The signs that are proposed, or the sign that you proposed, is there any way of adjusting the light dimness on this one, or is it a fixed light?
It's a fixed light. It's an undercarriage light, so that the light comes up from the bottom onto the face of the sign. There's no light directed at traffic in any way there. It's because it's a static board. The brightness it would be no brighter than any standard billboard that we have. In fact, it'll be the same lights. It'll just be more of them across the bottom to cover the expanse.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Plott.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. The pictures definitely helped a lot more. I appreciate that. And I know from working in the past that you're always very professional on your working. And I appreciate that you're local. And it's shouldn't say that, but I'd rather see you than Patterson doing something like this. If it wasn't, go ahead. I guess the problem I'm having that I keep going back to is all those other signs you showed us come with an awful lot of revenue for the city because they're all pylon signs. And there's no revenue for the city in this at all. And I'm still struggling with the precedents that we could set if we're only 225 meters apart from another sign. I'm not saying your ideal isn't location. I'm struggling with, we could have a sign like this every 225 meters potentially. If a company like Canfor decided we were okay with it, they could pop 3 or 4 up along 84th Ave. There's other landowners in town that all of a sudden we could have 4 or 5 of these on one stretch that are, within 1,000 meters, we could have 4 of this. Because the scary thing, I guess, from most industries is once a precedence is set, it's kind of a little bit harder for administration to keep a line then. So I'd love to see something done on that location because I think it's ideal. I'm just concerned that we'd be setting a bad precedent. So I'd like to see something from an administration a little bit further on that. That's, I guess, my take. But I really do appreciate the presentation. I think you nailed on some good points and makes me really realize maybe we need to be looking at the signs a little bit clearer because I think maybe we've overstated our safety concerns maybe in the past. So I don't want to speak against it. I'm just concerned about the process and potentially what the precedent could be set if we're that close.
May I respond to the?
Sure.
Thank you. To say there's no tax base, I guess, from them as opposed to pole signs, I'm not sure that is a fair statement. The property owners where the sign goes pay their property taxes, and whether they have a building there or a sign there or whatever there is there, the city reserves the right to tax them based on how the city wants to set their taxes. If taxing a landowner because they have a billboard on it is something the city chooses to do, that generates revenue. If you generate revenue from taxing pole signs or freestanding signs, then maybe that's something that has to be brought. But it seems prejudicial to me to say that those businesses can have a sign that is that size and that scope, but that business can't have a sign that's that size and that scope. When there's no more impact on the community, then in fact, there's less impact with this than there is on all those signs, and I think that's a very fair statement. But it certainly seems to me that it would be a prejudicial position to take to say that we don't warrant the same kind of consideration as a pole sign because of the tax position on it.
I guess the other difference is those companies can't put third-party advertising. You know, you can put third-party advertising on yours. Like, you know, Staples wants to just make some money and sell their ad space to somebody else. They're not allowed. So it's a little bit different position for.
They do charge for those signs.
No, but they have to actually have their business on that location.
That's right. But the sign generates a tremendous amount of revenue for those for the landowners. A tremendous amount of revenue. So it's a bit of semantics to say that they don't make money on them, or that it's different, that it's third party, because it's really third party because the landowner of the Gateway Plaza owns the signs, not Staples and not London Drugs. London Drugs and Staples are third-party advertisers on those signs. So there's no difference between them and a billboard, except they're limited to on-site, but that doesn't really change the revenue opportunity at all. And another comment is that to the 25% variance, there are a number of variances that are a lot more than 25% for some of these things. There's a digital billboard on the 116th Street that was given, I believe it's a 33% variance, and it's a digital two-sided billboard there. There's a billboard by the college, on the college's land, which is adjacent to the keg. The 100-meter requirement there is only serviced by 37 meters by that billboard. That's a 63% variance. They're all over the place. And they, they're important and they need to be there for certain reasons. This one can easily be exempted from that because there's nothing else there, and there's not going to be anything else there. There's not going to be 6 businesses moving in. Peace Wapiti is going to be there for a very long time. The cogen plant's going to be there for a very long time. Canfor's not going anywhere anytime soon. And so I don't think that we compromise anyone or anything with that variance. And the variance was approved twice at that, so third-party advertising that far apart is okay. The fact that this sign is a bit easier to read from a little further away, it's really more that we have an opportunity to generate some extra revenue. This sign, once it's been up for a very short period of time, is going to become part of the landscape, and it's not really going to be something that people are going to continue to phone City Hall about and say, I just can't handle the size of that sign anymore. The sign on the side of the TELUS building, people don't even think about anymore. And when it went up first, it was like, wow, look at the size of that sign. And now it's passé.
I appreciate you bringing this to all the stats and just kind of get my eye open around kind of our sign bylaw in general, I guess. So thanks.
All right, Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Chair Clayton. It's rare that Councillor Platt and I disagree. I don't think that everything has to necessarily bring a tax revenue to the city. My question for you, Mr. Driver, do you have an advertiser that's ready to go on this? I mean, if we go through this exercise and this is approved today, this will happen, and
yes,
you will have an advertiser on there within...
To the chair, as soon as we have the construction finished, we will have an advertiser on the sign.
Thank you.
A long-term advertiser.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I thank you for coming tonight, making your presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to, I'm going to close this public hearing. Sorry, I have one more.
I'm ready to move.
Okay, sorry. Close this public hearing, and I am looking for business arising from this, and I see Councillor Friesen in the queue. There you go. Sorry. One more time. Just turn your mic on and then you'll be good. Okay. There we go.
Thank you. So I'm ready to make this order then, this motion, if I can find it. Bear with me. I am going to move that Council give first reading to Bylaw C 1260-85, being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
Motion's in order. And I ask you to vote. And that motion carries. Councillor Friesen.
There we go. Thank you. We'll figure it out. If Mayor Given were away for another week, you'd be
exactly
all over it. Yeah, yeah. So I I don't mind these billboards. I find that they are clean advertising. They're typically national organizations or sort of national companies, and the advertising that they do on them, it really is meant to grab attention and in a moment.
Sorry, Councillor Friesen, I hate to interrupt, but before we have a discussion, could you make a motion?
I motion to.
No,
am
but
I?
we're now on to second. If you'd like to.
Oh, I thought we discussed it straight away.
No,
I'm so sorry.
We'll
Forgive me.
discuss it.
You'll hear my passionate.
There we go. Now, if you want to turn your mic on and you.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I am going to move then that we give second reading to bylaw C 1260-85, being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
Thank you, and that motion is in order. Now we can have discussion or debate on the second reading.
Now, do I get to say why?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. I find they're very clean. I think the ad campaigns that go on them are even more than the little ones that are sometimes designed locally and in-house. They're made to capture and communicate a message in just one glance, and they do so very well. I was a little worried about the size, and when administration showed that superimposition of the proposed sign over the existing sign, it really didn't make that big of a difference to me. If I'd seen that superimposition and was told that it was the current size, I think I would have believed it. It really doesn't look that big in that context. I like the way administration has proposed to consider the amendments to the bylaw on a case-by-case basis, which is a great way to start. And I also can't think of a better location to start this giving a try to a supersized billboard than the one that the proponent has offered us. And I think the proponent spoke very well to some of the concerns regarding the size, the distractions, the proximity to the lights and that sort of thing. So that is why I am making and will support this motion.
Thank you. I will ask you to vote on this motion. Discussion. The problem is we haven't voted on the second motion. So, yeah. Yes. Yep. 1 second. There has been a point of order called. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I believe that on second reading, there's the opportunity for more debate than just the mover.
Absolutely. And I have in the queue Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I just want to speak in favor of this motion. When I really don't know how I feel about these. I share that I don't know what the impact is going to be. And my biggest concern with them isn't so much safety, but just aesthetics. I don't want to live in a city like some cities I've visited where there's advertisement after advertisement, and that's my biggest concern. But I don't know how these are going to shake out. I was in Edmonton last week, and I made a point of driving past a number of these. And as I did, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was I hate seeing prairie skies and that kind of natural beauty blocked out by these. So as I'm thinking, where's a good location for the first one of these in the city for us to see it how it shakes out? I think some of us might think, well, let's put it on the outskirts, let's put it on a highway, let's put it way out there. But for me, that would actually be a more risky place to put one of these as an experiment. I don't think there's any better place in town to experiment with these than I can think of. So I don't know how I'll feel about future ones, but for a first one, this seems like a logical place to me, so I'll be voting in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. I'm also going to speak in favor of the motion. I believe that I'm sure that all of us drive through this city often enough to realize that most signs are not a distraction unless they're a distraction the first time you see them. We have all kinds of variances to where signs should or should not be located, and there's a plethora of signage around the city, and I just don't see this as adding to the problem. The other thing I want to acknowledge Councillor Thiesen's concern about the order of process and whether or not we should have been looking at standards for these signs before we went ahead and approved the location for one. And I would just like to suggest that for this particular case, we see some minimal standards set in the proposed bylaw amendment. I think they're enough for us to be able to allow this one to go ahead without having too many concerns about standards. And if we learn from having this sign in place that there needs to be adjustments to what the standards might be, then we'll have some practical opportunity and some practical reasons to make a decision that might be different in the future. I don't see this sign as a problem, and I'm very much in favor of seeing it go through.
Thank you. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Anyways, I'm not gonna speak out against the sign. In reality, like as I thought about it, I'm like I'm not really opposed to a super board. I'm not really opposed to a gigantic sign blocking a cogen plant, but the opportunities for it to start growing along Resources Road, 92nd Ave, 116th, 132nd Ave, as we develop, are growing and growing and growing. And the more super boards that we have, the more setbacks buildings are going to have to take for their own side road setbacks so that they can put these signs up there. And my concern is the proliferation is actually going to happen. I did mention that I had some concerns about the backwards planning process. I guess my largest concern is through this discussion, in reality is for a competitive advantage, we just tasked administration for 2 years trying to establish regulations on signs and how far their setbacks should be from each other, what their distance from the road, what the distance from each signs. Administration worked hard and diligently for 2 years developing this sign bylaw to be consistent, to allow as many options in the sign range as possible that could come into the city, to know and to find out that, hey, there were other options that weren't actually brought up for a competitive advantage. I mean, I don't think that's what council or the city of Grande Prairie should stand for. We just spent a lot of money building this bylaw. And because one entrepreneur wanted to have an advantage over the rest of the entrepreneurs in the sign industry, decided to keep his mouth shut and then write up an amendment to a sign bylaw that we just passed a year and a half ago. Like, so for me, the whole process is kind of tainted, and I got not a nice taste in my mouth. I wish that our friend Mr. Driver was a little more upfront in the process, especially since he's one of our professionals in the industry. But in saying that, I expect professional to act professionally, and especially when we're dealing with taxpayer money, and when we're tasking administration for anything for 2 years, it's costing taxpayers money. Our planning department could have been doing other things, and now we got to review this and add this. And I'm sorry, I just can't vote for this because I don't believe that it was all done in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thiessen. Just a couple things. I will remind Council that we are not revising the signage policy. This is truly a bylaw amendment, and although administration took a lot of time and Council put a lot of effort into this in the last term, I don't think that anybody was hiding proprietary secrets in regards to the fact that super boards may come to Council in the future. So in regards to this bylaw amendment, I think that if Council has the appetite to look at super boards, this is the best way to handle it, with a bylaw amendment. We're not opening the sign policy. We're not tasking administration with going forward with a ton of more work. And so this is the best solution if there is an appetite for a super board. I do think that if we are going to support a super board, this is a great location, because no disrespect to the cogen plant, but I'm totally fine seeing a nice advertisement rather than a blank wall building. So I will support the amendment. I have one more person in the queue, Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Clayton. I will support this board sign because one thing is big and is easy to read, but I got a question for it because long term they want to widen the road, like Robin said. So it's possible they can move a little bit back so it doesn't occur, because long term when you talk about a grandfather, then you might be moved, I don't know, 5-10 feet back. So that time it does not occur the problem for the safety reason.
Mr. Weldon, I don't know if you have any comments. I know that it was discussed briefly that even with the expansion to a 6-lane highway, there was no, it's still within the property line, and there would be no impediments to a 6-lane expansion of that road.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right, seeing no one further, I am going to call the motion on whether or not to have second reading, to give second reading to this land use bylaw amendment, land use bylaw amendment. And I'll ask you to vote. And that motion is carried. Now we're going into the next one would be to a motion to have third reading. And a reminder to everyone that's here, this motion needs to be unanimous in order for this motion to carry. And I will ask you to vote. Oh, sorry, I apologize. I need Councillor Friesen.
I'm ready to make that motion. I would like to move to have third reading of bylaw C-1260-85 being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
And as I mentioned, I was a little early on that, but once again, this motion doesn't need to be
at this meeting.
At this meeting, yes, thank you. And it does need to be unanimous. All right. And that motion's carried. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. So what I would like to move then to give third reading to bylaw C-1260-85 being an amendment to the land use bylaw.
Thank you. Ask you to vote. And that motion is carried. All right, moving on to unfinished business. I'm not aware of any unfinished business. Next up, under reports, no reports, and we'll move into committee business. First, under Community Living Committee from January 30th, 9.1. And if I am correct, that's Councillor Teason.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clayton. I would move that Council receive the minutes of the Community Living Committee meeting held Tuesday, January 30th, 2018, as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Teason. And that motion is in order. Just looking for a couple more. All right. We'll just wait for him. In the meantime, I don't tell jokes, so I apologize for this, but as soon as Councillor Minhas gets back, we will finish this vote. Maybe Mr. O'Toole, Councillor O'Toole, you could ask him to come back and vote if possible.
I think he's in the bathroom. You were going to ask me to sing or something.
No. For Councillor O'Toole to sing. Sorry, Councillor Minhas, we need you to vote on this motion. To receive the community living minutes.
It's life or death. Life or death.
Great, thank you. And that motion is carried. Yes. 9.11, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Clayton. I would move that Council authorize the use of public housing reserve monies up to $80,000 for the development of a business case analysis for an arm's length housing development corporation. This came up at a committee meeting, and there was a little bit of debate in and around it, but to ease Council, this is money that is not extra or going to cost us any extra out of our budget. It was already used out of our housing reserves, and the purpose of this would be to develop a high-level business model to have an at-arm's length housing corporation, as well as the main priorities, key activities of the corporation, the financial impact of the corporation on our municipality, and any contraventions that it may or may not have under the Municipal Government Act. We're sure to get a robust review put together once we tender out the contract to a consultant, and I would encourage Council to recommend this or to approve this.
Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I just think another important point of clarification is that my understanding of the process is out of this motion, the money's not actually going to get spent. Administration's going to be crafting an RFP. We asked for more information about that RFP to come before committee before ultimately it even got sent out, and an RFP wouldn't be awarded till another vote of all of council. So there's still a few steps until this money actually gets spent, and I'm not convinced yet that I'm going to be voting in favor of spending that money eventually. That being said, I'm going to be voting in favor of this motion because I want to get more information about what this RFP looks like, and also I think that there's a chance that we might want this coming out of our strategic discussions, that I would hate for us to decide a month from now we want to initiate this process, and all of a sudden we lost a month of time. So administration assured me at the committee meeting that it's well within their resources, well within their ability and their comfort level to craft this RFP before we look at it again. So this is really not really approving money to be spent, just letting administration take a look at what it might look like to spend money, if that makes sense.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. I'm very confused. The recommendation is to give access to the public housing reserve up to $80,000 for a business case. I don't see why the money might not be spent, or why they would have to come again to get permission to spend the money that we've just authorized the use of.
Councillor Bressy, you had a comment?
Yeah, it speaks to that. It's because the process proposed is that we would hire a contractor to build a business case for this. That would go through an RFP process, and my understanding is that council as a whole has to approve that RFP before it actually gets approved. So that RFP still has to get approved at council before the money actually gets spent.
I believe I can chip in here. It's getting a little confusing, everyone. Essentially, what's going to come back to committee is the scope of work for the project, for the RFP. It will be detailed. This is what they're going to be doing, and that's how we're going to request for a proposal out to any potential consultants who are going to pick up or make a proposal due to our requests. This is all based around the scope of work. This is an authorization by council to use the reserve monies, and it will come back to committee as a report with the scope of work for the request for a proposal as per it was. At that point, I believe that if committee isn't happy with it, we could probably shelve it at that point. But right now, I believe that administration is authorized to use up to $80,000 to put into an RFP to have a consultant come in and do this work for our administration and detail what the plan is for a housing corporation at arm's length.
Well, at this point, committee is recommending council approve it, but acting CIO Walker had some comments. Maybe if you could expand sort of on the discussion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The motion is clear that it is authorizing administration to use up to $80,000 of the public housing reserve to fund this project, and barring any other agreements that were made at the committee table, those aren't recorded here. So my understanding of this is that administration would go ahead and pursue this initiative and would not come back to council for permission.
I believe what Councillor Bressy is, sorry.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you. I believe what Councillor Bressy is alluding to is in the minutes, and in the minutes it says, and further, to bring back a scope of work for the request for proposals to committee, and that is recorded in our agenda package. This is just the authorization for that $80,000. There was a couple suggestions through our agenda at Community Living. One was that we could do a very extensive research, which was $120,000 to $150,000, and the other one was to be a less extensive publicly consultative process where we'd spend $50,000 to $80,000. Committee at that point chose to go with less consultation, since we already have our housing master plan, affordable housing master plan, and we've done serious consultation there, and so we authorize up to $80,000 for this process here. But what Councillor Bressy is alluding to is to the and further, which is recorded in our agenda package here today.
Thank you. Councillor Plott.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this motion. I didn't support it at committee, more just because I can't understand why we wouldn't go with the $50,000 option over the $80,000 option. I've asked around about this, and unless I'm missing something, we're consulting a lawyer and an accountant. I don't know how we're spending anywhere near this kind of money. So I would like the idea of the community social development. I can't get my head around how we're going to spend $80,000 on a report, though. So I won't be supporting the motion. I would like to see the community social development, or sorry, the housing corp looked at, but I can't support $80,000.
If I can just interject before Councillor Bressy, I also won't be supporting this motion. I have some concerns with allocating money to an initiative for a business plan prior to strategic planning for council. So not to say that after strategic planning is done with council, that I won't think that maybe we will, as you mentioned, need more money. I do want to explore the opportunity of a public housing corporation or development corporation through council. However, to earmark any money, in my opinion, is a little too early, so I won't be supporting this motion. Councillor Bressy.
Thank you. I want to speak to two things. One is that we don't know that this is for a lawyer and accountant. At the committee level, we didn't really know what we'd be getting with this business case, what it would look like, how many experts we brought in, what public consultation might look like. We just felt like we didn't have enough information about what a business case could even look like. And the advice we got from administration, well, at least my understanding is the best way to get an understanding of what that business case might look like was to get the initial work on RFP done so we can see what we'd actually be asking consultants to do. So I want to speak to that. The other thing is just clarify my comments before. My understanding is maybe I'm misunderstanding city purchasing processes, but my understanding is that an RFP cannot be awarded without a vote of council. So the process would look like at committee level, and that's incorrect?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's incorrect.
Then, all right, so.
There's a dollar amount that sort of signifies whether or not it comes to council.
Gotcha. Well, in that case, I apologize. That's different than what my understanding from the committee level was, but in that case, I'll actually be voting against this as well. So my apologies.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clayton, Deputy Mayor, for the week.
Are you saying it's long and arduous? Like, get on with it then. Let's go.
A long council meeting. So because there's some concerns about process here, I was wondering, and you mentioned it as well, that there was a possibility that we could talk about this as strategic planning. I know we're going to be very, very busy that week. Is it be possible that we could table this till after? We're obviously not on any time constraints. This is something that council has a desire to do. So I was wondering until we got kind of our thoughts on paper, if we could table it to another date.
So you're wanting to make that motion?
I will make that motion to table this Arm's Length Housing Development Corporation at a future date. Need a date? Can I say the second council meeting from now? After the strategic planning.
Second council.
So we'll give it to like 1 full month after.
I think that motion's in order. Sorry, is there any comments or questions on the motion? 1 second. Councillor Plott.
I would support that. I guess I'm kind of concerned or wondering, one of the things that we talked about at Living was not that we need to rush this, but we'd also like to get some process going, was there's a lot of consultations going to have to go with public. And so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, we're looking at realistically 6 weeks from now before this would come back for council, for us to maybe instruct administration to start the consultation process, because that was one of the concerns I had with hiring out the RFP. Was let's make sure what we're hiring is what our industry wants to do, what we can locally support and build, before we go out and find out that we hired a consultant and they actually didn't meet the needs of the Grande Prairie CSD department and the different groups that would play a role in this. So I don't, maybe I'm just throwing out, I wonder if it's a potential to amend it just to say or maybe a secondary motion to say we'd like to instruct administration to continue or start consulting ASAP, even though that this won't come to us for 6 weeks potentially. So I can make that as a second motion after this one's over.
Yeah. Can you amend a motion to table?
No, you know what? I'll say I'll just leave this, and when one's over, I'll make a motion that will instruct administration. Okay. Thank you.
So, sorry, Councillor O'Toole?
Just to reply to that, I fully agree with you there. I was kind of hoping that if we gave them the 6 weeks, that they would probably take that on upon themselves without having to actually give them a motion to do that. There's enough CLT in the room here right now that they would probably forward that on, and I would give them the due diligence to do that. So I don't think that we would require a motion there.
All right, so I'm going to call the motion on the motion to table. The motion carries. All right. Anything else highlights, Councillor Thiessen, from your...
No, nothing else to highlight, but it was a great meeting.
Thank you. Moving on to 9.2, Corporate Services Committee meeting. And
that would be me.
Councillor O'Toole.
Yes, I would move the council receive the minutes of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held Tuesday, January 30th, 2018 as presented.
Thank you. Seeing no omissions or errors, I call the motion. And that motion is carried. Any highlights or anything you wanted to make notice of?
Yes, I just got one report, and it was the unaudited financial statements. They were approved as of November 30th, 2017. This is something that we do quarterly. It talks about expenses and where we're at in the process through financial statements through the Director Corporate Services, Susan Walker, and her department. And it's I'm not going to say it's a rubber stamp thing by any means, but it's a process that we go through every quarter to look at where we're at in the city and our expenses, and look at our other issues when it comes to financial well-being.
Thank you.
We also I got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Councillor Payette directed administration to provide information on our current state of the facility master plan and report back to committee. Those are just a couple of the highlights.
Great. Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Moving on, 9.3, Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee meeting. That is mine. So I can't make a motion. If I could have somebody from that, Councillor Blackburn, if you'd be so kind to make a motion to receive those minutes.
Services. Sorry. I move that Council receive the minutes of the Infrastructure and Protective Services Committee meeting held Tuesday, February 6, 2018, as presented.
Great. Seeing no errors or omissions, I ask you to vote. Motion's carried. And I think I'm going to get you to continue on, Councillor Blackburn. There's a few motions there. If I can help out in any way, I know you were there, so carry on, young man.
Thank you. I don't get called that very often. All right. I would move that Council approve a request to extend the period for subdivision endorsement for Z 140034 to January 29th, 2019. And I will speak to this and the next two motions with the same comments. These are extensions that are appropriate because of the current housing market. And what this does is give developers an opportunity to hold tight until the market improves to the point where it makes it appropriate for them to develop.
Great. Thank you. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. And the motion's carried. 9.3.2, similar type motion and extension Z14-0035.
Thank you. I move that Council approve the request to expend the period for subdivision endorsement for Z140035 to January 29, 2019 for the same reasons that I've already expressed.
Thank you. No comments or questions on the motion. All those in, if you would please vote. Thank you. Motion is carried. 9.3.3, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I move that council approve the request to extend the period for subdivision endorsement for Z150018 to November 25th, 2018.
And I will call the vote. Motion is carried. Great, thank you. Moving on to item 9.3.4, policy 316. I'm going to spread it around because I know there was other committee members there. If I could ask Councillor Friesen to address this policy 316. If you're there, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So this policy is the downtown incentives program to invest in higher density residential development, building, and facade improvements. And there were just a few really housekeeping sorts of changes, and you will find those amendments, and that was regarding that a proof of means be provided prior to giving a grant. And there was some grant matching that was referred to, up to 50% of the costs to upsize water and wastewater connections to a maximum grant amount of $50,000. Option to defer a general municipal tax portion of the incremental assessed value of the property for 3 years. Now, this doesn't mean that they don't have to pay the taxes on it, but after 3 years, they would then have to begin repaying the taxes that they would otherwise have paid over those 3 years. There's also a waiver of city fees where amounts remitted to other levels of government are still charged, but the city-imposed portions would be waived. A demolition grant of up to $50,000 to match up to 50% to demolish an existing structure. The engineering service fees, I'm going to have to read this to remember what this one was. All fees relating to excavation and barricading or lot grading permits. That's a definition. I'm sorry. So it redefines engineering service fees, inspection services, permit fees, and planning and development fees. It also defines proof of means and a small change, adds those ones, and a small change to urban residential development grant. Holy cow, how'd I do? So there you go.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. Just need one more. And the motion is carried. Thank you. If I can get you to do the next one too, Councillor Friesen, 9.3.5. The traffic signals project.
Oh, was that one mine again? Now I've lost the...
That'd be great.
Yeah, I can, but now I've lost the page I was on because I had to go into the... Alrighty, the traffic signals. So I'm going to move that council approve the following changes to the capital budget. First, change traffic signal funding from 108th Street and 132nd Avenue to 89 Avenue and 116 Street and maintain the same funding amount and source. Second, to change traffic signal and geometric upgrades funding from 92nd Street and 72nd Avenue to 132nd Avenue and 97B Street and maintain the same funding amount and source. And delete the traffic signal funding for 92nd Street and 132nd Avenue. So these are updates to what was originally planned. They look at traffic counts and activity on those roads, how long people are waiting at lights, all those kinds of things, and have made these recommendations. So I make that motion.
Great. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I've got a question for administration that I didn't give them a heads up on, so I understand if there's no answer for it, but I promised I'd ask it. On 132nd and 92 Street, it's a block north of a school that I understand gets a lot of issues before and after school, and the issues I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like a traffic light would solve them at all, so I'm very supportive of deleting funding for the traffic light. I'm wondering if we know if we've put any thought into that area, if there's any other things we're looking at that we might do in that area to help some of the safety concerns that I've had people bring up to me.
Director Galante.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, that is correct. The engineering department is monitoring the entire area and coming up with a more comprehensive plan, including potential crosswalks or pedestrian activated bottoms as well, in addition to any traffic signal. So same situation applies to 132nd Avenue and 108th Street. That temporarily the signalization is being removed right now. However, the funding remains on the traffic levy pot. It's about 5 million. So as soon as the improvement is warranted, administration will come back to council seeking approval for those funds.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Councillor Palat.
Thank you. I guess similar, I've got a question for administration that I apologize I didn't give a heads up on, but at the meeting it was brought up that there was a $5 million reserve and that's about $500,000 for a set of lights. I know I can't remember, the scoring ratio wasn't quite there for 108th Street and 132nd Ave, but I am just wondering if we did go ahead and put those in. There was some discussion around what the throwaway cost would potentially be. I guess I've thought about that a bit more. I'm a little bit confused what the throwaway cost would be as far as we set the engineering, we set where the sign is going to be located, that we could just build it and then the roads would be twinned at some point down the road, or if that's an option, because I guess there's still part of me that is worried that we wait a year and a half or potentially a year to put those headlights there, and then that's a problem. And so I'm just wondering that we have the money in the reserves. If it's not a big throwaway cost, if that's something we should be discussing again sooner than later.
Director Galante.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The challenge with 108th Street north of 132nd Avenue is that the gravel portion has to be realigned, and that is a conversation with the developer as well. We don't have even a preliminary design yet in the books. So in order to position the set of traffic signals, we need to come up with detailed engineering to really, put the lights on the right spot. All the electrical conduits and the electrical component of that, we did a quick estimate, and the sunken cost of that can be in the range between $150,000 to $200,000. A potential solution is to come up with a set of temporary lights that are movable. There are some challenges as well with vandalism or, people moving that, but a temporary set of lights is the option we are really analyzing right now. However, again, the engineering department is monitoring closely that area, and we're in contact with the school board for the potential opening of the date for the school. So we want to be proactive, and although the warrant is not there right now, the hard numbers, we are cognizant that we wanted to be proactive and avoid any issues with pedestrian vehicles. So summarizing my comment, I believe that the temporary set of lights, that may be the best solution until we have the final detailed engineering design with the final alignment of the gravel portion of the road.
Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Clayton. Director Galante, just a question in regards to 92nd Street and 72nd Avenue. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the entrance to Countryside North on 92nd Street? Yeah? Because
sort of north of that.
Sort of. It's sort of there's two entrances. Anyways, I've gotten lots of feedback from people about the ability to be able to turn left for buses, especially during prior to school hours and after school hours, and buses arriving late or showing up late. And they say the cause is that they get hung up at that intersection, that three-way along 92nd. The other part of that is, I guess, as you're turning right out of there and I guess traveling north on 92nd, is that the shoulder of the road is very degraded. It almost reminds me of Highway 40 anytime I've tried to travel it. And there's just no shoulder to the road. And I think over this winter, anytime I traveled after a snowfall event, I always saw 1 or 2 cars or trucks in the ditch on that side of the road that got sucked in. So I guess my concern is really safety and timeliness, especially seeing as that road has picked up a lot of traffic over time. And I'm not sure if we're under evaluating, or I know we had people there at certain times, but was there a justification I missed at that committee meeting?
Director Galante, did you have any data to support that decision?
Yes. We have the ability to monitor live the traffic right now with the intelligent traffic system. So I will pass this comment to our supervisor, and we can even adjust from the service center, from a control room, the green time for the left turn. So if he notices a queue on different times of the day, he's able to adjust the timing remotely. So we will follow up on this. The same for the shoulder. We will monitor right now in winter. It's difficult, but as soon as the snow is gone, if we can increase, we can widen the shoulder a bit in the area to transition and the right turn accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Seeing no other comments or questions, I apologize. I can't. Was it Councillor Friesen that made the motion? All right. So I will call the motion now. Please vote. And that motion is carried. Thank you. 9.3.6, Councillor Friesen, if you want to take that one, the bylaw amendment, please.
You bet. So this is a bylaw amendment. So I'm going to move that council give first reading to bylaw 1267A, being an amendment to police services fees and charges bylaw. Do I speak to it now?
No, not yet. I will call the motion on that. Right, we're good. Oh, sorry. My apologies. It's a bylaw amendment, so we're just, right? So we're just gonna, are we doing the first and then, okay. That's okay. I was finally right. All right, there we go. Looking for a few more votes. Yeah, exactly. Just looking for a couple more on that one. And one more. There we go. Motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. So this is simply an amendment on the charge that people have to pay when they are fingerprinted. So this is when folks go in for a background check for a volunteer organization that they're working for, and they have to have a fingerprint check or for work or whatever. The amount that's charged now to get the actual report on the fingerprints has increased, I believe, to $75. I thought there was a portion in here of administrative fee.
Director Galante.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The fee was previously $50 until October 2017. $25 went to the Receiver General, to the federal government, and $25 were kept for the city because of the administrative fees. In October 2017, the federal government decided to increase the federal component to $50. So right now we are sending 100% of the funding to the federal government, and the intent of the amendment on the bylaw is to collect the $25, the city's component, until such a time during this year that we perform a comprehensive review of the fees and charges for the entire city, so we can revisit this amount again during 2018. The intention for now is just to avoid the loss of revenue because of the change from the federal government.
Perfect. All right. So, any comments or questions? Oh, sorry, we're on second reading. I have Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. So just some background on this is the reason you get fingerprinted is because you did anything wrong. It's because you have to share the birth date and gender with a criminal that you know nothing about, and all of a sudden you're bad luck, you have to get fingerprinted. I don't like that you have to pay for that. I don't like that you have to pay for the criminal activity of somebody that you have no idea who they are. The federal government wants to charge for that, and I understand that, but I'd rather us not be charging that. So I'm going to move an amendment, and that is that on Schedule A, we change the $40 fee for police information checks to $45, and we change the $75 fee for fingerprints to $50. So what this would do is this would let us recover the revenue that we're losing from splitting it up between everybody who's getting record checks instead of those. Sorry, I'm just seeing, is that a motion that's in order? Okay. So that would let us still recover this fee, but instead of taking it from those unlucky few, it would let us spread the fee that we're recovering across everybody that goes to get record checks. A few reasons why I think that's important is I think that a small increase for everyone is better than a very large increase for just some people. It's $75 might not seem like a lot, but this week I heard from a college student who's a part-time EA in a school who had to get his fingerprints done, and that $75 hit on his month. It was a struggle for him. So I know that there's going to be some that say, well, hey, it's just the cost of doing business. This should just be eaten, and I understand that, but I'd suggest that a predictable cost of business that applies to everyone is better than a much larger cost of business that applies to just some people and they have no idea when it will apply to them.
Councillor Presley, could you repeat your breakdown of the numbers that you had mentioned on your amendment?
Yeah, so for police information check, it currently is $40. I'd like to change that to $45. And for fingerprints, it's proposed that we change that to $75, and I'd like to change that to $50. So essentially, we'd be keeping fingerprints the exact same fee as they are now, but raising for people that go in to get an employment background check, they'd be paying $5 more.
All right. Councillor O'Toole.
I'd just like to ask for some clarification. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Jackie Clayton. As you look in Schedule A, it says police information check for volunteers. They must have an agency letter, and that fee is free. And I would imagine that's going to stay continued. There are people that are in this same role, volunteers, and they go through a check. I happen to be one of those gentlemen that there's a bad dude out there. He can change his name as many times as he wants, but his fingerprints are his fingerprints. So currently, if you have an agency letter, it is still free. I was just wondering if that is how the proposed new services fees is going to be adopted.
Director Galante.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that is correct. No intended changes on the for the practicums and for volunteers. That is free for volunteers and $15 for practicum. The rest will pay $40 or $45 if the amendment passes.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I will not be supporting the amendment.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. I apologize if it's my hearing that's the problem, but I don't believe that we have a motion on second reading.
Yep, we do.
Okay, I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Sorry, just let me check, double check. Yeah. Okay. So you're good? Okay, thank you. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Jackie Clayton. It seems like it's fun to say, so I had to get in there with that. I just am curious because I appreciate where Councillor Bressy's going on this. He was pretty adamant about the thing, and I was the guy that said, "Hey, whatever." But I'm just wondering how the revenue would break out. If the math was consistent on that, if we would be kind of a wash on that, of we're $25 backwards on one and up 5, if that's near a wash.
So is this question for Councillor Bressy?
Well, I guess it's more for I'm appreciating for administration. So if we go up by $5 in one, is that going to be enough to offset the $25 loss on the other one?
Director Galante.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have some stats here to share. So the revenue potentially lost in 2018 will be about $17,000 if we keep the fee at 50 and not going to 75. Okay. So in 2017, the police did about 7,000 criminal record checks. We don't have a detailed breakdown in terms of practicums and free and pay, but assuming that 50% as a conservative number are paid, when we multiply $5 extra times 3,500, that is $17,000, which is exactly the same revenue. So with that assumption that only 50% of the criminal record checks are paid, the rest are free or practicums, will be a wash.
Okay. Thanks, Director Galante. Appreciate that. So I guess I will be supporting the motion as it looks like it's neutral, and I feel like Councillor Bressy's put a lot of thought into this. So, and I don't see it really being a negative on the 40 to 45 as big as the $75 hit. So.
All right, seeing no further comments or questions, we're voting on the amendment right now, which is, as Councillor Bressy mentioned, to change the police information check to $45 and reduce the fingerprints to $50. That is the amendment on the second reading. So I'll call the motion. Please vote. And that motion is carried. So now so the amendment is carried, and now we'll vote on the second reading. Ask you to vote. Hang on. It's not as quick as us. There we go. Please vote. And that motion is also carried. All right, now I'm looking to for a motion to have third reading. Councillor Friesen.
So I will move that we have third reading of bylaw C-1267A at this meeting.
Questions on that? I ask you to vote. And that motion is carried. And for third reading, Councillor Friesen.
No, forgive me. Should I have said as amended?
No, it's
okay.
Approved, so it's
all right. So I will move then that we give third reading to bylaw C-1267A, being amendment to police services fees and charges bylaw.
Ask you to vote. And that motion is carried. Moving on, finally, my apologies. 9.4, a Council Committee of the Whole meeting for February 6th. I didn't identify somebody. Can I ask Councillor Blackburn if you would mind to report on this Committee of the Whole?
First, I will move that Council receive the minutes of the Council of the Whole meeting held Tuesday, February 6, 2018, as presented.
Sorry, I have a question. I think I clicked it too soon. Can we re-vote on that one? Is that all right? Because I only see 7 votes there. So I bumped someone out inadvertently. So if we could please re-vote on that. Just looking for one more. Oh, it's mine. There we go. I just didn't give myself. Okay, there we go. Motion is approved. Councillor Blackburn, any, I think there's a motion.
Yes, the purpose of the Committee of the Whole meeting, primarily, although there was more than one item on the agenda, primarily we were there to talk about the application that had been made by the developer of the cairn to extend time on getting the completion of his parking lot done. And we spoke about a number of different elements of the issue, and we asked administration to come back with some more information on that. But in the meantime, we decided that it would be a good idea to at least start the process of fining the developer for having missed the deadline on the last permit. And the first fine is restricted to being an amount of $250. And so committee is recommending that council issue a fine of $250 for the current non-compliance for the development permit. So I would make a motion to that effect.
Vote. That motion is carried. If you'd like to continue on, Councillor Blackburn.
I didn't have anything else that I was going to raise for that one. Thanks.
Yep, perfect. Okay, thank you for that. Moving on, item number 10, correspondence. There's no correspondence that I've received. And number 11, under delegation business. We had 3 delegations here tonight. And so I'd be looking for any business arising from those delegations. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you. I guess I would move that we receive the presentations from the Weyerhaeuser Caribou Range Plan and from Northern Alberta Development Council for information.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none. Motion's carried. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. It's roller derby. I got to go check out the Try It Day, and I was impressed by the people they brought in the room. What was impressed to me is not only did they bring 30 people to it on that horrible snow day. I was expecting to show up and be just me and 4 of them, but they brought 30 people to it, and a lot of them were young people. A lot of them were people that were putting on skates for the first time. So it's something I'd love to see. So a motion. I'm open to coaching on this motion, but I think an appropriate motion would be that we direct administration to report back to the appropriate committee with the space requirements for a roller derby game and potential options within city facilities. So I'll say that one more time, that we direct administration to report back to the appropriate committee with the space requirements for a roller derby game and potential options within city facilities.
All right, that motion's in order. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none. The motion's carried. Thank you. No notices of motion. Moving on to council member reports. If I'm correct, and I don't know who's in what order here, so I'm going to say Councillor Friesen with Sport Council. You can go first.
You bet. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Clayton. Sport Council Excellence Awards is coming. The Sport Excellence Awards is coming up. There were a total of 38 people nominated for 44 awards. So some people were nominated for more than one. So 48 total nominations. And that's coming up on Friday, March 2nd. So get your tickets if you're not going to be too tired after coming home from Jasper. They're working with officials to set up some social media. So with refereeing officials for hockey to set up some social media assistance to increase interest in bringing more officials into be able to ref. They're also assisting the Centre for Newcomers to add a sport component into their cultural integration camps. I thought that was a really wonderful idea to bring Canadian sport into those integration camps. And they're also working on a few upcoming tournaments, the 2019 Men's Fastball Tournament, and they're just assisting with these, and the 2018 Soccer Provincials, but I didn't get what age or anything that is. And then also an upcoming regional pickleball tournament. Don't ask me. I don't know. Something you convert a tennis court into. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. Next, the Intercity Forum on Social Policy. Councillor Thiessen, is that you?
Oh, that's me.
Councillor Bressie, my apologies.
Thank you. So it was fun getting to go hear what's going on in some other cities. I really appreciated that opportunity. In the morning, we received a presentation on cannabis legalization, which was not very informative because the provincial government doesn't really know what we're going to be doing yet. It was interesting to hear some of the medical perspective on it, but I'm looking forward to hearing what we actually get to do on this. But in the afternoon, we chatted with MLA McKittrick, who is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Education. And she was talking about the idea of community hubs, which is a direction that the government is hoping to move, where the idea is you build a school, and something we've seen many times in many iterations, but it's the idea of you build a school and you put a bunch of other community facilities attached to that school, you share space, you share funding, and the idea of the school should be the center of a community, but also it might be a more efficient use of resources. I know that I've got some skepticism to it, because who knows if there's actually going to be consultation in the community, but apparently this is a relatively recent idea of the Premier that the Premier's pushing down, apparently. So hopefully we'll get to see some action on that, and I'd really love to see that.
Great. Now moving on to roundtable, I'm going to stick with you, Councillor Bressie, if you want to continue. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, while I was in Edmonton, it seemed like a waste just to go for one meeting if I could cram in more. So I went the day before because I had to anyways for flights, and I scheduled myself some tours and some coffees with various individuals to see what was going on in Edmonton. And I think the most interesting coffee I had was with Councillor Andrew Knack from Edmonton. And the two, we talked about a lot of things, but the two that were most interesting to me was he talked about Edmonton's Youth Council, which is breaking a lot of ground. And I really appreciated that they've got a bylaw around their youth council. They've got a formal reporting mechanism with the youth council coming back to council. And their theory with it isn't that we want the youth council to engage with youth ideas, but we want them to bring the youth perspective to everything the council's already talking about. So one example of that is they're redeveloping their municipal development plan right now. And the youth council is going to have a committee dedicated to giving their perspective on that, which I think is cool, and I think it would be a cool model for us to see here, not just for our youth council, but for other advisory boards we have in the city. I know we need to talk about those. That was one thing that was interesting. The other thing that was interesting to me was that they're talking a lot about autonomous vehicles, and they actually have staff dedicated just to autonomous vehicles right now, not just figuring out what are the impacts on parking, bylaws, things like that, but aggressively going after autonomous vehicle companies and saying, hey, we're open for business. We want you to innovate within our city. How do we have to get you here? What do we need to change to make that happen? And it was cool for me. I know that we're not going to be able to pull the same weight as Edmonton, and maybe this isn't a particular area we want to pour our weight in, but I think in terms of being aggressive with economic development and getting out there and figuring out how do we get innovation within our city, I think that's an example that I'd love to see us follow in many ways.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Jackie Clayton. I attended on February 1st, the family medicine meet and greet put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And what that really is there's a bunch of doctors doing locums and looking at the potential of working in the Grande Prairie region. And most of them were thinking about the Grande Prairie area, such as Grande Prairie. I spent 2 hours talking to them and they were from the University of Alberta. And a good portion of them really liked the idea of coming to Grande Prairie. I asked if it was the new hospital, and they said no, they liked the region and the people and what we have in Grande Prairie for just an individual and families. I also attended the Lunch and Learn put on by the Crime Prevention Department. And there was Constable Caitlin Cooper. She's an investigator with the RCMP. And she talked about next of kin information. And this was very important. And I didn't necessarily realize how important it is to have your family information available to you, whether it's in your wallet or your purse or on your fridge or next to your phone. Emergency responders respond to all kinds of situations. Maybe there's a death, maybe there's a missing person, maybe somebody's lost, and health concerns where they're not necessarily thinking straight. And so they can be very time consuming and a burden or a resource burden. There could be the potential of getting legal access to your house, get a court order. And fingerprints don't always cover everything. So if you are living at home, living alone, whatever the situation is, she really, really was wishing that people could develop an association with their neighbor, maybe your employer, maybe landlord, and have information available that could include your next of kin, actual family members, or a close friend, and that could also be your employer or your next door neighbor. So take it for what it's worth. It saves a lot of time for the resources of the RCMP, and a situation that could be, most cases where there's a individual that is deceased, it could take a minimum of 2 hours, and sometimes it's months. So I just wanted to share that with you. That was a very good presentation. Look forward to the rest of the Crime Prevention Department's Lunch and Learns.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Mayor Jackie Clayton. I had small functions and I really admire Eunice or Bear Creek Funeral Home. The timing they done the great job. And I think she can fill in, but I was very impressed to seeing that whole impressed. Then we went to the Chamber, Jeffries, that was a new place to open. And some other one, but I'm getting a few complaints, actually quite a few. 116 going from south to north, south to east, turning lane, that arrow never comes. And their big lineup get the truck, hold that corner. It goes to, going to north, they comes, but going southeast, that green arrow doesn't show, and then line up, get up there. Especially big trucker, they get quite a bit upset because they hold on the lot.
All right.
Either the timing is they set up wrong, or it doesn't happen all the time, or just a particular time, I don't know.
Okay. Maybe you can discuss that with Director Galante after and give him sort of the feedback you're getting. That'd be great. Thank you, Councillor Minhas. Councillor Thiessen.
Sorry, I requested to speak there and then just started eating styrofoam. You know what? It was a pretty slow week, actually. I'll be quite honest. I'm sure everyone's been grasping to try to find events to talk about and things to do outside of coffee dates and telephone calls on snow removal and stuff. But I had two things that I'd like to highlight. The first being on February 7th, I had the opportunity to present what pretty much sum up as a mini State of the City address to the Grand Prairie Construction Association annual general meeting when I was asked to give the mayor's presentation for about 15 minutes. I'm like, 15 minutes? What do they want to know? Like, what are we tendering? Like, this is the construction place. Essentially, after some digging, David Dollinger, our communication specialist, he came forward and helped me draw up a list that I had added to my own list, and then he put it in tangible writing formats, and so hence it was a mini State of the City address that I was there giving to about 30 people in comparison to 300 of what the mayor will actually give in a couple months. But Councillors Platt and O'Toole were in attendance, and I was happy to have that kind of support there for that. The other one would be the day after, where I got one of those rare opportunities where you get to cut a ribbon, but not just any ribbon. You cut a ribbon for a friend, and for me, the first time is to cut a ribbon for a colleague. Now, I'm not like Councillor O'Toole, who's cut lots of ribbons for lots of colleagues over his tenure on council. This was my first time, so I was really happy to be at the Bear Creek Funeral Home and to check out their new beautiful building, which is state-of-the-art, beautiful facility, and one that I don't know if I can have fun in a funeral home, like I know the Friesens do, like that's their job and they love it. So some people are weirded out by that, but I had a great time there. The food was great, the company was great. I even got lifted up on on a hoist to put me in a casket. They didn't size me for the casket, but you know, it's never too early to prepare for death, is what I'm saying. And at least they know that one small lady named Emily Friesen can crank me up on the crank and get me in the casket. But good show to Doug and Eunice. It was an honor to be there and see your baby bloom and come into fruition in our land. So it was a wonderful ribbon cutting and one that I'm sure I will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thiessen. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. I must say that since the last time that we met here, I have shoveled a lot of snow. And so very briefly, kudos to administration and to the folks that are responsible for clearing roads. It's been a challenge, and I think that they, for the most part, have been up to it. Well done. A couple of things that I attended. One was the Grande Prairie Public Library board member orientation. Being a new member on that board, they provided information for me and two of my colleagues. And just in time, because this week at our next regular meeting, we will be having board elections and committee appointments. And it's good to have a clear understanding of what might be keeping me busy in the next while. Excuse me. The other thing that I will mention is the Chamber of Commerce hosted Family Medicine Meet and Greet, which was a very nice event. Excuse me. These are medical faculty candidates at the college, and they held this meet and greet so that other members of the community could meet with these potential candidates, and so they could meet some of us and who we are in the community and get a sense of what it's like to be in Grande Prairie. It was a great event. I really enjoyed it. And excuse me, that's enough for now.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Jackie Clayton. I had a pretty light week. I guess the last couple of weeks, the highlight for me was probably the volunteer services branch. A lot of good facts, a lot of good information. Very passionate Edie and Carolyn there, and I'm going to be following up with her again here hopefully next week to just get a little bit more involved with that. But good group, and I just didn't realize how much reach they had in the community, so it was a good eye opener.
Great, thank you, Councillor Friesen.
Thank you very much. I had a quiet couple of weeks as well, except that I didn't. On behalf of council, it was a little quieter, but we did, as was mentioned, we hosted a ribbon cutting with the Chamber of Commerce at our business, as well as 2 other community events. So there's not really a whole lot to report on, but I do need to let you know that I got Councillor Thiessen's permission today to post a photo of him in that lift on Instagram, so you can have a look at that a little later this evening. And we had to delay the official part of the program, so we were all ready to go. My mom got there even, and I said, okay, Mom's here, we got to start. And everyone was in and ready to go. And then Emily, our daughter, who had a great deal to do with this facility, wasn't there. So we had to go looking for Emily. And we walked in, and there was Emily with Councillor Thiessen horizontally up in the air about 4 feet in this lift that we used to move people from dressing into the casket. So that was quite a sight. And yeah, we had to delay the official part of the program. She didn't believe him. She kind of laughed and turned around, and there he was climbing into it. So that was a highlight of my week. But I really appreciated my colleagues on council who attended, Councillors Blackburn, Thiessen, and Minhas, and O'Toole.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. I also had a fairly light week in regards to council duties. Did a bit of work for traveling, or traveling for work, so I've been a little away, and I apologize for missing your ribbon cutting. I heard great things about your event. I did, as Councillor Palat mentioned, enjoyed the Volunteer Services Bureau luncheon. There was great information there, and they're doing many great initiatives. Serve a really nice role within our community. Yesterday, not really as a council duty, but I had an opportunity to get out to Nighthawk. My youngest son was in a ski race, and if you haven't been to the hill this year, regardless if you ski or you don't, go tubing, go for brunch, something. It's beautiful out there right now. Obviously, there's lots of snow and they're enjoying it, so I encourage people to get out there. And other than that, I have nothing else to report, and I will call the meeting adjourned, and thank you for your patience.